Hello and welcome to 6 Part. Today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Deku Got the Phoenix Force? Part 1. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Not everything was going well for Izuku Midoriya. It all began when he was exposed in class while applying to UA, Japan's most prestigious hero school. If Izuku and the other students were made fun of by his friend Kachan, who also applied, then that wouldn't be so horrible. No, Izuku was reminded once more of his quirklessness. Just 20% of people on the planet shared the same genetic makeup as those in ancient times. The others possessed quirks, or superpowers, due to genetic abnormalities. Characters in costumes have jumped from comic book and manga pages to the real world ever since quirks became popularity. Being a hero was essentially every child's ambition, and Izuku held that desire for ages. Reminding him that he was at a disadvantage to everyone else annoyed him. The situation worsened after school. In order to hide from view, Kachan and a few of his companions cornered Izuku. Kachan advised that Izuku dive from a roof if he wanted a quirk, burned Izuku's notebook full of hero information, and ordered the youngster to give up on his ambition. His day was significantly ruined by that. Although Kachan's explosions were always a bit too violent, this was most likely the worst he ever experienced. Kachan's suggestion that Izuku commit suicide would not be taken seriously, was he? Izuku's day was already in ruins, and when it got worse, he brought home a notebook that was almost completely burned and more self-doubt. A villain assaulted Izuku. A sludge guy of some kind attempted to take control of Izuku's body. The child was on the verge of death. Thankfully, a hero came to Izuku's rescue. All Might, not just any hero. Since day one, Izuku has looked up to the symbol of peace. Before Izuku could ask the hero a crucial question, All Might left after stuttering a thank you and signing his notebook, which Izuku would always cherish. Izuku was safe and in tow when the hero landed on a rooftop after he grabbed onto his leg and scared the very daylights out of them both. Izuku found that All Might wasn't always the towering figure of physical might he was depicted on television while attempting to ask him a question. It turns out that the hero's real form was scrawny and shrunken after he injured himself in a struggle. Izuku made a vow to keep this a secret from everyone, and then he asked All Might a crucial question. Is it possible to be a hero without a quirk? No, All Might said. Izuku's emotions were broken. When his idol informed him that his desire was unattainable, the world around him became uninteresting. It was merely background noise, but he might have heard All Might suggest that if he wanted to help people, he might become a police officer or a rescuer. He was finished. Izuku was told the same thing by his idol, the one who smiled and saved everyone. You can't be a hero without a quirk. After assisting Izuku in descending from the roof, All Might vanished into the throng. Izuku mumbled a thank you, or did he? He was not really listening. As he walked gently, his body simply moved on its own. Izuku was aware that he didn't want to return home. All he wanted was solitude, to take in all. His life seemed to be one big, awful joke. Everyone around the child, including his idols, is putting down his desire. Most likely, it went on longer than necessary. However, Izuku did nothing to correct that or disprove it, in contrast to all those earlier films. He was unable to train his body to reach its maximum potential. Because his father worked abroad, he was able to live with his mother on a middle-class salary. Although Izuku was intelligent, he lacked the skills necessary to create the kinds of devices that would enable him to compete with others who had quirks. Yes, perhaps if he set his mind to it, but Izuku didn't give that any thought. He had reached the woods outside of Musutafu by this point in his depressing journey. Who knows how long he was out there? Semi-aware of his surroundings, Izuku pulled himself along. What was his life going to be about? Would he still make an effort to fulfill his heroic ambition? A role dictated by some dumb toe joint and genetic chance? Or was that dive something he wanted to do? No way he would go that far, would he? Izuku felt himself trip over something and fall face first on the ground, stopping his spiraling thought process. He rubbed away the pain for a few seconds before realizing that he had stumbled over a little rock protruding from the ground. Could he be so pitiful? In the woods, tripping over arbitrary rocks? Like a Deku with no value. Kachan had called Izuku that ever since the boy had discovered the other's quirklessness. Izuku was always upset by the term, but the body made an effort to ignore the bad implications and concentrate on the fact that his friend had given him a nickname. He was a fool. Izuku became aware of it as he began to stand up. A hole in the earth. It didn't appear natural, but it also didn't look artificial. If you looked down, all you saw was darkness. Izuku observed something else, though. A noise. Something buzzing or humming in the hole's depths. To hear it, Izuku had to lie on his stomach. Izuku got to his feet and turned to face his origin. He really ought to discuss this with someone. This might be a large object, such as a relic or some subterranean ruins. However, it called to Izuku as he turned to face the hole, requesting that he come down and observe. Gazing down the black entrance, Izuku swallowed. Luckily, Izuku could descend ledges that had been carved out of the rocks. He was never the most athletic child in school, so he took his time. He realized he needed light to proceed after he reached the bottom. Fortunately, Izuku had his phone with him at all times. Izuku switched on the flashlight and walked through the cavern's hallways. It was claustrophobic and damp. Izuku's shoes and socks were saturated by the water puddles he stepped in. The air seemed limited, as though this location had been isolated from the outside world for a very long time. Some parts required him to move sideways. Izuku had the unsettling fear that he was lost in this granite labyrinth all the time. But he was always accompanied by the sound. All he had to do was follow it. He knew he was getting close as the buzzing and humming grew louder. Izuku searched for minutes before finally finding it as he stepped into a larger space. The majority of the space was occupied by this. It appeared to be set into the walls. You could still face it from the front and the sides, but that was about it. It was so strange. Despite being composed of rock, its base was facing Izuku and glowed with blue crystals. What was more unusual was that there was an organic vine-like substance inside the crystals. It was easy to hear the humming Izuku coming from above and throughout the caverns. There was more to the sound than a buzz. It had a singing-like tone. "What are you?" inquired Izuku. He approached it cautiously. The intensity of the singing decreased, turning into a softer melody. It was within touching range of Izuku. "Where did you come from?" Izuku extended his hand in the direction of the crystal. In time with Izuku's hand, the vines imprisoned within grew closer. The entire crystalline structure changed to a cool yellow as soon as he touched it. Izuku began muttering to himself. Was this a heat-sensitive object? Did it possess additional properties? If it came into contact with other quirks, what would it do? Izuku grinned at his own realization. Then, anguish, yelling. The buzzing became a deafening chorus of screams. Izuku shouted as it burned into his head. The cry was too loud for him to hear. Izuku yelled in agony and put his hands to his head. It continued. How come it wouldn't stop? A warm sensation ran down his cheeks. Was there blood? Was his blood involved? Was he in pain? Izuku couldn't tell since everything hurt and his head felt like it was on fire. He attempted to flee, but his excruciating pain prevented him from concentrating. Everything was made worse by the ferocious red glow emanating from the cave. Please, someone please assist, help me, someone. He was unable to escape. He had no idea how to get out. The fact that he was unable to assist last night, Inko Midoriya had trouble sleeping. Izuku, her son, stayed out far longer than normal. She was certain that her son might have become sidetracked after seeing a hero fight on his way home. What if he was injured, though? That day, her kid and her buddy Mitsuki were caught up in a villain attack. A sludge villain attacked poor Katsuki. Fortunately, All Might intervened to save the day. Inko repeatedly watched the news to check if her son was among the crowd because she knew that Izuku and Katsuki were buddies. He wasn't present. She prepared dinner for two but only ate one as the evening grew into the night. She nearly neglected to eat. She waited for some indication that Izuku was all right while she sat on the couch. Her son was missing. Her baby was missing. When she went to her room, it was already late. She heard someone entering her room, but she was already in bed. She gripped the culinary implement like a lifeline, using an improvised weapon. Their apartment's dark living room was lighted by the flashlight she had fished out. The bathroom light was on when she followed the noise. Izuku's room has an open door. She opened it, pushing it just enough to reveal the dimly lit chamber. The quantity of All Might souvenirs was constant, even at night. Inko shifted her lamp to the bed. Her prayers were heard. Izuku was doing fine. He was in his bed, sound asleep. She struggled with conflicting feelings. She fought the impulse to give her kid a hug to avoid waking him asleep, was relieved that he was safe, and was understandably concerned about where he had been. She retreated from the room as quietly as possible, shutting the door behind her. She exhaled a breath of calm. Her infant child was doing fine. She checked on the bathroom and lowered the utensil. She nearly gasped as she looked down, but the sink and mirror told her nothing. There were many bloodied tissues in the garbage can. Blood covered them all. Some were still fresh-looking, while others had dried for a long time. Izuku's school outfit was also on the ground. The dried blood was soaked across a large section of the top. Some of the stains were smeared, as though someone had attempted to remove them but failed. Inko wanted to go back to her son's room right now, wake him up, and ask him to tell her what the heck had happened. Why was there so much blood all over the place, and why did he arrive home so late? Her breathing became steely. She reminded herself to think. At this late hour, she was unable to obtain answers. Izuku would be drowsy and disoriented, attempting to console his sobbing mother since she knew that the waterworks would begin as soon as she began to inquire. Inko inhaled deeply, then exhaled. Tomorrow. They will not discuss it until tomorrow morning. She would ask her inquiries as soon as she saw him. When daylight finally arrived, Inko hardly slept at all. Her thoughts whirled over every scenario that might have occurred the previous evening. Was he attacked? Was he abducted? How did his uniform get so covered with blood? Was there a fight with him? Inko was working in her kitchen. Izuku appeared to be still asleep. Fortunately, they had plenty of time to chat because there was no school over the weekend. Nevertheless, she felt nervous and jittery due to the expectation. She turned so quickly that she forgot the remaining ingredients on her right side and threw them across the room when she heard a door slam behind her. Now, there was nothing unique about Inko's quirk. She was able to draw tiny objects to herself thanks to a mild kind of telekinesis. Outside of official registration, using a quirk in public was prohibited, but using one in one's own house or on one's own property was acceptable. Inko assisted with cooking and other domestic duties by using her quirk. She therefore realized she wasn't the reason behind the food cluster stopping and hovering in midair. When Inko looked up, she saw her son standing in the bathroom doorway, his hand lifted in a gripping motion, motionless and trembling. As Izuku's hand led the food to the kitchen cabinets and placed them down, she followed his actions. Inko turned to face her son, who was staring down at his trembling fingers. Her son saved their brunch by using telekinesis. Her body used his thoughts to lift and move food on his own, despite being told at the age of 4 that he would never have a quirk. The mother and son exchanged glances. Izuku made deliberate breaths, while Inko held hers. The beginning of blood dripping from her son's nose was visible to Inko. Izuku finally uttered, "Mom," after what felt like an eternity, "we need to talk." Izuku talked to Inko throughout the remainder of the morning, mostly about what happened the night before that given him his new abilities. Izuku acknowledged that he couldn't recall how he left the cave or made it home. Telekinesis, a misplaced phone, and blood-stained clothing were all that remained of him. After crying, apologizing, and hugging, the mother and son reconciled. Loads and loads of tears. Emotionally, it was a lot. Taking Izuku to the doctor for a quirk assessment and examination was the first thing on the schedule. One of the doctors gave an assessment following several minutes of waiting, testing, and then more waiting for the results. As previously demonstrated, Izuku possesses a telekinetic force that is stronger than Inko's. Izuku is not limited to attraction. Unlike his mother, he is free to move an object however he pleases. Izuku gets a harmless nosebleed if he uses his powers excessively. The doctor advised Izuku to cease utilizing his powers anytime a nosebleed started, even though it wasn't lethal. The doctor was very perplexed as to how Izuku, who had been declared quirkless at the age of 4, came to possess a quirk. The doctor didn't have a solution for the mother and son, but he did offer a theory. It turns out that most quirks triggered around puberty back when quirks were more common. The age of quirk activation became earlier and earlier throughout time as more and more quirk owners had children, eventually reaching the typical average age of 4 to 5. Naturally, Izuku and Inko were aware of the truth, but they chose to keep it to themselves because, well, who would think that Izuku had been given abilities by an underworld artifact? Izuku immediately turned to his hero journals and the internet after getting home to find and study other heroes who possessed telekinetic quirks. Before his nosebleeds started and he had to take a break, Izuku used his telekinesis to subtly train it while floating items around his room. Izuku had drawn the lucky straw with specific parameters of his authority. According to research, it wasn't ideal that he got nosebleeds every time he overused his talents, but at least he didn't have more orifices to bleed out of or crippling migraines. Izuku's telekinesis could be used for stealth because, in contrast to some other heroes, his abilities didn't radiate an aura. His mind was buzzing with potential uses for his new quirk. What were his boundaries? Did weight or quantity determine how much he could lift? Could he enhance his physical abilities by entangling himself in his own telekinesis? Could he use his abilities to fly? He simply continued to mumble and ponder about the options. He wanted the other students at school to see. His intention was to show Kachan. Hold on. Is it possible for him to show his peers? It has nothing to do with the law. The problem was more social in nature. Izuku was known as the quirkless Deku. For the majority of his life, he was the loser, the oddball, and the misfit. He appears at school the following day, and all of a sudden he has a quirk? Would he be accepted by his peers? Or keep on abandoning him? What is Kachan's opinion? He took great pride in his quirk. It had enormous strength, power, and ability to defeat villains. Whenever he could get away with it, he flaunted it. Izuku was also familiar with what it was like to be the target of it. What would Kachan do, then, if he discovered that Izuku possessed a quirk? Izuku came to the realization that he either didn't know the answer or didn't want to acknowledge it. Kachan took pride in himself. Kachan took it personally whenever someone challenged him, making sure the other person knew who was stronger. Would Izuku become another example of Kachan's quirk if he shared his newly discovered power? Inko did state that Izuku was free to choose whether or not to share his new quirk with others, provided it brought him joy. However, which choice was correct? Izuku was only a teenager and didn't know. Izuku discovered that Kachan was absent from school on the day he returned. The boy found that strange because, like Izuku, Kachan had flawless attendance. Later, Izuku learned through his classmate's grapevine that Kachan had been attacked by a villain the night Izuku gained his abilities. All Might, a very recognizable hero, had to save him from a sludge evil. Kachan has to recover for a few days once it becomes out that the sludge villain made him unwell. Izuku made the connection and understood that he was solely to blame. When Izuku caught a ride on All Might's leg, the sludge villain must have escaped. After attacking Kachan, the villain forced All Might to go over his allotted time. As soon as he discovered this, Izuku wanted to apologize to Kachan, but he held back. Ultimately, it would disclose Izuku's fate that evening. Additionally, Kachan's fury is already out of control. Izuku didn't want to think about his reaction. Izuku thus remained a ghost for the remainder of his middle school career. He tried to stay out of trouble, do his tasks, and respond to inquiries. When he returned, even Kachan had changed. He was still easily agitated, but he was more reserved and concentrated on his studies. Izuku and the other students realized that they needed to work harder than ever before in order to succeed in school. 10 months remained till the UA entrance exam. Izuku stood with his back to the beach, staring at the undulating mounds of trash heaped on top of one another. He inhaled the scent of the place while wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that said, "Tank Top," in kanji. The combination of the salty ocean breeze and the foul smell of trash and corroding machinery made him regret it right away. In the past, Dagoba Beach was a well-liked summer destination. It even served as a Mustafa tourist attraction. One day, during a hero fight, a heap of trash fell onto the beach. Over time, the once pristine beach turned into a temporary landfill because no one chose to pick it up. Although it was a depressing story about how human indolence has destroyed nature, Izuku wasn't there for that reason today. No, Izuku created his own secret training area. Generally speaking, it was against the law to use your quirk outside of authorized job or at a quirk gym. However, Izuku was aware that not many people ever passed Dagoba Beach, an ideal setting for training his body as well as his telekinesis. Izuku wasn't an idiot. He was aware that he lacked any real muscle, but he wasn't a walking stick bug either. Thus, it would involve both quirk and physical training. Izuku could always turn to carrying the rubbish by hand or hiding among the literal mounds of trash if someone were able to capture him. Was this tactic overly dependent on chance? Indeed. Well, isn't that how most teenagers organize their lives? Izuku would also be contributing to the community. He heard some elderly locals complaining that Dagoba Beach used to be lovely before it got to where it is now. Izuku would be contributing in a manner that was previously impossible for him. Without a quirk, one individual couldn't really make a difference, could he? The initial days passed without any issues. Izuku's nosebleeds from overusing his quirk were his main issue. This was lessened by having multiple packs of Kleenex with him. Due to his continued focus on education, Izuku was unable to train as much as he would have liked. He was still moving forward, albeit slowly. About a week after Izuku began his training, everything changed. Fortunately, he was using his hands rather than his brain to carry a used microwave when a raspy voice shouted out to him. "Kid," is the title, not the name. Izuku turned and saw a man's skeleton. He had spiky golden hair that flowed weakly in the wind, as though he had a tiny bit of willpower to keep it from falling. His eyes were sunken in, and his pupils' vivid blue glow was noticeable. The man appeared to be wearing clothing that was overly large. They appeared to have come from a taller, more powerful man. You might sympathize with this man if you spotted him in a crowd because of his frail appearance. However, this man was the covert identity of the symbol of peace, All Might, to Izuku and a select few allies. He was now hobbling toward Izuku's location. Izuku stopped. What ought he to do? Of course, be honest. No, not entirely. Izuku was unable to claim that he was testing his quirk because it is against the law to do so. Izuku is still regarded as quirkless by All Might. He can disguise this as community service and strength training. A few distance from Izuku, the real All Might came to a halt. He seemed to be attempting to recall the youngster as his gaze swept across Izuku. All Might said, "Hello, young man," in a voice that was shockingly gruff. "May I ask you what you are doing?" Izuku searched for a way out, looking to the left and right. Izuku stumbled. I'm cleaning the beach, instead." An unpleasant quiet fell between them as they said, "Ah, a noble cause. If you'll allow me to ask, what made you want to take up such a task?" "Oh, training mostly. I'm preparing for the UA entrance exam. I know it's months away, but better to start early, I guess." "Ah, I see," said All Might with a head nod. He paused again for a moment, and then resumed. "Actually, the main reason I came down here was to apologize." "Huh?" Izuku asked, staring up at the man bewildered. Look, we both know who we are already, so no need for introductions, but I just wanted to say I was wrong for denying your dream like that." Stunned, Izuku stood. What was happening? Why was the number one hero, All Might, the symbol of peace, expressing regret to someone like him? All Might went on. "Why I do think being a pro hero is too extreme for someone without a quirk. I didn't have the right to brush away your dreams like that. Especially with what happened later." Izuku suspected that he already understood the direction of this tale. That sludge villain somehow broke free and was trying to possess some young man. The boy tried to fight it off, but his quirk caused fires along the street. The pros on the scene could only keep the citizens safe while nobody did anything to help that young man. I was there in the crowd, waiting for someone to go and help that boy." Izuku gave a nod. I knew that guy. He was, my friend." "I see," All Might said with a nod. "You know, while I was there, standing, doing nothing, a thought came over me. Would that young man I told off on that rooftop would step in? Try to save his friend even if he didn't have a quirk?" After giving it some thinking, Izuku responded, "I don't know. I guessed I'd like to think I would have. I'm probably sure you know the end of this story already. A hero up, stop the villain, save the boy, and it's a happy end for everybody." One more uncomfortable pause between the two. Izuku attempted to start a conversation. "So." The back of his head was scraped by All Might. "Well, I wanted to let you know that I approve of your dream. And if you want, I can help you train for the entrance exam. It won't be easy, especially without a quirk, but I'm sure you can do it." Izuku gazed intently at the hero. Izuku was just offered training by his idol. All Power. Izuku would be ecstatic and letting the waterworks run if this had happened earlier, say before he gained his new abilities. Now, though, it seemed as though he and All Might were speaking different languages. "I have to say, Mr. All Might. All Mi Toshinori told Izuku. Call me Toshinori Yagi when I'm like this, okay? Don't want any unwanted attention." Izuku said, "Right," and then lowered his gaze. "Well, I'm very humbled and all, but there's something else that you should know about me." Toshinori appeared perplexed. "What are you referring to?" Izuku released the microwave and it floated in place, causing Toshinori to pause. With a wave of his hands, Izuku lowered the microwave into the sand. Izuku remarked, "Mr. Yagi, I have a quirk." Toshinori appeared almost astonished. "But didn't you say you were quirkless?" "I was. But then I got this quirk from somewhere else." Going up to Izuku, Toshinori put his hands firmly on the boy's shoulders. "Young man," Toshinori said as he gazed at him with a level of intensity he had never experienced. "Tell me exactly where and how you got this quirk." So after All Might left him, Izuku told the story again. He discovered his new abilities on his journey through the woods, the hole, and the object. Fortunately for Izuku, Toshinori's expression became less intense but instead more reflective. There was stillness for a few minutes before Toshinori finally said, "Young man, could you show me where you found this object?" Izuku straightened up. I could. I don't remember exactly how I got there, but I know a general direction. But I really want to go back to my training and Midoriya, the beach will still be here after you show me your quirk's origin, Toshinori replied. "But how will we get there?" Toshinori said. "Easy, my boy," but All Might grinned. "By the power of walking and public transportation." It was a long and awkward road for the pair. Not only did Yagi exhibit a sense of urgency, but so did Izuku. He had to stay out late for a mentor, so he contacted his mother, on his new phone, incidentally. Although this temporarily allayed Inko's concern, it did require the two to maintain the course of their voyage. Izuku and Toshinori arrived at the woods after a few train rides and kilometers of trekking. The two made an effort to keep the conversation light despite the long journey. Actually, that didn't work out. They eventually find the correct route thanks to Izuku's largely helpful instructions. A park warden abruptly halted the two as they were approaching the hole. "I'm sorry, sir," the ranger said, preventing them from continuing. "I can't let you two come any further." Toshinori said, "And why is that, officer?" "The ground's unstable. We're taping the whole place off." The police made frantic motions toward the neighborhood. Izuku questioned, "Could it be a villain attack?" The ranger said, "Don't know, kid," and shrugged. "Still, best you two move out of here." Toshinori drew Izuku aside and gestured for the child to join him as the two left. They cautiously made their way through the bushes until Toshinori led Izuku to a clearing where they could see the taped-off area. All Might inquired, "Is that where you discovered that artifact?" Izuku gazed. With the exception of the hole, everything appeared the same. Rather, several rocks were covering the hole. Izuku said, "Yes, sir, that's it. Except the hole's been covered. Maybe by a cave-in?" With a frown, Toshinori shrugged. "Could be. The ranger did say the ground was unstable." Izuku agreed, although he wasn't quite in agreement that it was a straightforward cave-in. Perhaps after giving Izuku a quirk and allowing him to escape, the object closed the cave. It might have remained down there, or had it gone already? For the time being, the two were still powerless. Toshinori looked at Izuku as they walked back out of the trees. All Might said, "How far is your house from here, young Midoriya?" "Oh, it won't be too long. I mean, it's not short, but we should get there before nightfall," replied Izuku. More quiet, "You know, my offer still stands." Izuku turned too, a little bewildered. Izuku was still not convinced. "You're still offering to train me?" Saying, "I'm serious, young man," Toshinori grinned. "I believe you have serious potential. Plus, I know a thing or two about late development quirks." "Sincere question, what do you mean by that?" Izuku said. Toshinori chose to disregard it and go on. "Would you still take my proposal?" Izuku grimaced inwardly. "If I say no, would you arrest me for illegal quirk use?" All Might jumped a little. "No, but, if I did catch you actually using your powers on the beach, I would have to step in." "Oh," Izuku sighed. It was a dream that seemed unreal. Izuku is being offered training by All Might. It seemed like a dream realized. It's still up there, albeit perhaps not as amazing as the sidekick dream. I mean, stumbled Izuku. "I'm very humbled and all. It's just unreal to me, that's all." Before hacking up some blood, Toshinori chuckled. His words, "I get you, young Midoriya," were honest. "I felt the same way when my idol offered to train me." At last, the two emerged from the forest and started to move into the neighborhood. Izuku got himself ready. He had to express this with complete assurance and conviction. Izuku stated, "Mr. Yagi, All Might," while attempting to maintain a balanced stance, "I would be honored to be your protege." With a thumbs up, All Might transformed into his hero form. "Great!" he exclaimed loudly on the street. "But, we should probably tell my mom about this," Izuku's rapid addition said. Literally, All Might deflated. "Yes," Toshinori said, embarrassed, scratching his head, "I guess we should." Before being taught by All Might, Izuku had hardly ever worked out in his life. He tried his newfound work, to be sure, but it was not the same as all the weightlifting, endurance, and muscle building he was now forced to do every day. However, Izuku did not request that the symbol of peace serve as his personal trainer. Only now has the situation's reality really dawned on him. Nevertheless, Izuku was pleased with the two's improvement. In particular, Izuku had more time to train after school officially let out. He thought it was wonderful that the youngster was getting bigger muscles. Regarding his mentor, All Might was a competent physical trainer. He even had a detailed plan outlining Izuku's exercise routine, including his eating and sleeping regimen. Izuku would undoubtedly struggle to adhere to this, but that is a different matter. All Might was unable to teach Izuku to control his own telekinesis, even though he was an excellent physical instructor. Izuku couldn't hold the number one hero responsible for his limitations in wisdom. To stop villains, All Might used just his physical prowess and his quirk's tremendous strength and speed. Izuku's quirk was entirely cerebral. He relied on his intellect to carry out the laborious tasks. Izuku exercised both his body and his quirk almost daily for the next few months. Izuku had to explore with his own quirk because All Might only had a basic understanding of telekinetics in general. Occasionally, it was by way of other heroes' examples. All Might, in his slender form, sat on a junk pile and asked, "So, what are you planning to do again?" Izuku was quite a ways away. He had a wide berth because the majority of the trash had already been removed. Izuku clarified, "I'm going to try to fly." Some of the pro heroes I've read up on said that if they extend their telekinetic field around themselves, they would be able to simulate flight. And you think you'll be able to pull off something similar? Izuku shrugged and turned. "I don't know yet, sir. That's why I'm trying it out." All Might said, "Well, good luck, my boy," with a thumbs up, plus ultra. Izuku closed his eyes and turned. He inhaled deeply, then exhaled. With his telekinesis turned on all around him, he opened his eyes and leapt. To be fair, Izuku leapt higher than he usually would, but gravity overcame him, and he hit the sand face first. "Young Midoriya, are you all right?" All Might began to stand up, but Izuku signaled the pro hero to stop with a raised palm. Izuku reassured, "I'm all right," his voice hushed by the sand. Izuku picked himself up and brushed the sand from his clothes and face before making another attempt. After jumping, Izuku used his quirk on himself. He reasoned that activating his quirk and jumping were somewhat counterbalanced, similar to simultaneously tapping two buttons on a controller or keypad. Perhaps it was leap, then quirk, one after the other. Izuku did a backflip in midair as a result, and landed face first in the sand once more. Toshinori stood up and hurried to assist Izuku in standing up. "Maybe we should take a small break," suggested Toshinori. "Maybe," Izuku said, wiping the sand from his cheeks once more. "Do you have any advice?" The back of Toshinori's head was scratched. "Well, I can't fly, but my jumping is the best I can compare with. Whenever I prepare to jump, I squat down, clench my butt cheeks, and build up power in my legs before rocketing off." "That's interesting, but I'm not looking to launch myself into the stratosphere. I'm trying to go at it small," Izuku said, glancing up at his instructor. "Well, you know more about your quirk than I do. I'll make sure you don't hurt yourself too bad." Toshinori then departed to once again relax on his junk pile. Izuku closed his eyes and brushed away the remaining sand. Izuku attempted to examine the issue. After he jumps, using his quirk simply causes him to crash to the ground. What might be different? Izuku might want to calm down. When Izuku initially began using his telekinesis, he recalled that his movements were deliberate and slow, only becoming faster with experience. Going slowly might have been the solution. Izuku inhaled deeply once more and concentrated. As he assumed his position, he placed his palms on the ground. He saw himself surrounded by a dome of electricity. Then he willed it upward. Slowly, he felt the sand grains rise beside him. Then he sensed his quirk stabilizing and progressively raising it. Continue to maintain his breathing rhythm throughout. When Toshinori exclaimed, "Young Midoriya, you're doing it!" Izuku saw himself hovering 2 feet off the ground when he opened his eyes. As he began to raise himself higher and higher, he cried out in delight. Izuku spun and swirled in the air, shouting with joy. It was true, he read, that some heroes say flying is one of the best things in the world. Izuku experienced an incredible thrill he had never experienced before, even just floating there. The contagious happiness even reached All Might. As he climbed higher and higher, Izuku didn't realize he had one query for which he had no answer until a few minutes later. It also frightened him. "How do I get down?" exclaimed Izuku. After a moment of concern, All Might turned to his famous smile. "Let go of yourself. I'll catch you," could All Might say as he grew larger and more strong. Izuku overcame his dread and made an effort to focus on the knowledge that All Might will eventually catch him. As he released himself, Izuku exhaled. Izuku shouted as he plummeted, but not before All Might's powerful arms ensnared him. Izuku fought to recover the lost wind in his lungs when the number 1 hero gently placed him on the ground. All Might coughed up blood and reverted to his slender form. The symbol of peace suggested, "Next time we try that, let's be in somewhere with a ceiling, okay?" "Yeah," Izuku nodded his head shakily. At other times, it was a total coincidence. Izuku was out clearing one of the biggest heaps of machines. It was packed full of crammed antique kitchen appliances. Izuku was reminded of the ancient game Jenga. He was essentially removing sections to prevent the entire tower from collapsing. He has done this to multiple mounds before. He was starting to get the hang of it after doing this for a few weeks. He only needed to trust his instincts and muscle memory. One particular cooler was giving Izuku difficulties. He had the option to use his telekinesis, but he was spending the day doing physical training. The cooler got closer and closer with each tug until it eventually popped out. Izuku turned to return to the hordes of trash that were waiting for him, feeling proud that he had finally managed to get it out. He was unaware that the cooler was a crucial component of the pile, and it soon began to wobble. The refrigerator that was on the pile and eventually fell on Izuku was even worse. Observing from afar, Toshinori saw before his young apprentice saw. "Watch out behind you, Midoriya!" shouted the hero. When his student turned, he saw that the refrigerator was going to crush him. Unable to get out of the way, the child froze. All Might hurried to his feet and sprinted, but he had already spent up his time and was too far away in his regular form to catch up. Toshinori could only watch in horror as Izuku dropped the cooler and raised his arms in a pointless attempt to defend himself. With the distinctive sound of metal bending, the refrigerator crashed into the boy. The refrigerator slid off to the side as if it had struck a more substantial object rather than falling further. When Toshinori saw Izuku standing there, perfectly uninjured, he stopped dead in his tracks. In disbelief, the child simply looked around to see what had happened to him. All Might hurried over to his pupil and gave him a pad to check for bruises. In a panic, the pro-hero questioned his protege, "Young Midoriya, are you all right? Does anything hurt?" "No, sir. Nothing seems to be hurt at all." "What happened?" Izuku shook his head. "No. I don't know, but," the hero said, gesturing toward the refrigerator. "Apparently, whatever you did made you tough enough to dent that refrigerator and come out unscathed. What was going on through your head when that happened?" "I remember being scared and afraid. That I couldn't move. Then, I just tried to defend myself on my own. I felt it hit me, but I didn't feel any pain. Actually, I felt like I was activating my quirk instinctually," Izuku began to murmur. "Could it be that I can activate my quirk whenever I'm in danger? Is it always fully automatic or do I have to concentrate on it? Does it work for things I can see, or can I be surprised attack? The only way I could survive that is." "Young Midoriya, you're losing me with your mumbling," Toshinori said, reminding his pupil to cut down. Sorry," Izuku said. "I think what happened is that I summoned a telekinetic shield all over my body that stopped that refrigerator from crushing me." "Is it automatic? Or do you to recognize the danger to block it?" "That's what I was thinking as well." Toshinori coughed uncomfortably. "Do you want to test it?" Izuku paused to consider his response before responding. "No, I really don't want to almost get hurt again." "Good. I didn't want that to happen as well." Sometimes, Izuku's drive was his greatest strength. On a lovely Saturday night, the sun was sinking. With over half of the beach already cleared, the master and student were sitting and sipping cool, refreshing beverages. All Might said, "You've made good progress, my boy," to the boy. "Thank you, sir," Izuku said with a smile. "It really means a lot coming from you. You've earned it." For a while, the two sat quietly, enjoying each other's company. "You ready to call it a day?" the hero asked his pupil. Izuku would typically respond in the affirmative, gather his belongings, and head home. But Izuku's reaction today was different. Izuku said, "Actually, sir," gesturing off into the distance, "I want to pick up that." Toshinori found a rusty, dilapidated old pickup truck by following his student's finger. Before Izuku used his telekinesis to remove the most of it, it was the middle of a big mound. The discovery of a truck on the beach startled both the teacher and the pupil. And it was an antique. Normally, All Might or someone with a strength quirk could pick it up and move it out onto the street if this was a sponsored cleanup project. They made the decision to hold off until Izuku's telekinesis was sufficiently powerful because this was training for him. All Might questioned, "You sure you can lift something like that now?" Even outside of practice, Izuku has been practicing his telekinesis frequently. Izuku was becoming proficient at handling several objects at once and lifting larger objects. Izuku previously claimed that his bed was his strongest item and that he had moved the furniture in his room several times. Izuku gave All Might the same resolute look in return. With confidence, the boy said, "I'm sure of it." The symbol of peace gave a nod of agreement. Izuku rose and continued walking until he was 30 feet ahead of the truck. He inhaled deeply and exhaled. This time, he assumed his position without using his hands to steer the vehicle. He concentrated. Izuku's force caused the metal to howl as the truck skidded across the sand. Then it was lifted over the road and out of the sand. It hit the ground near the dumpsters with a moderately soft landing. Izuku went to his mentor with excitement, and his expression was filled with wonder at Izuku's quirk. Izuku exclaimed, "I did it," with a broad smile. Just as Toshinori was ready to say it, he saw that Izuku's nose was bleeding. "Midoriya, Your nose. Izuku's fingers reached up and touched his nose, which was dripping blood. Izuku exclaimed, "Oh," without even realizing he was bleeding. Izuku used the tissues to mop up the blood and shut his nose, and All Might was swift with them. For Izuku, it was still progress even if he overused his quirk. Sometimes, it was his own worst enemy. The trash bags struck the sand much earlier than anticipated. Even though Toshinori couldn't see the boy's face, he could tell Izuku was tired. All the silent messages he required were conveyed by his body language. The peace symbol went up to his young pupil. "Midoriya, are you okay?" Izuku turned, a little taken aback. "What?" He seemed to have missed the question at first. "I'm fine, sir. I just lost my grip, that's all." The bags beneath Izuku's eyes were visible to Toshinori, despite his eyesight not being as excellent as it used to be. The number one hero softly inquired, "Are you getting enough sleep?" Izuku said, I am, too hastily. I just need to focus up." "Izuku," All Might said, demonstrating his seriousness by using Midoriya's first name. "Are you following the guidelines? Do you not get enough sleep?" "I do," yelled Izuku. His expression changed from one of frustration to one of guilt. "I just do some extra exercises before bed." "What kind of exercises?" As it happens, Izuku works out more before bed. Additionally, these exercises would go on longer than he had planned. All Might let out a disappointed sigh. "Izuku, the All-American Dream Plan is tailored with your body in mind. Following it would reach you exactly where you need to be. These late-night workouts are only hurting you in the long run. You don't need the extra exercises." "I do need them," Izuku yelled. "I'm going against kids who've had their quirks for years. They've been training to be heroes for years. If I have any chance against them, then I need go beyond what's required. Isn't that your motto? Plus ultra, go beyond?" Toshinori's eyes were constricted. He detested it when his comments were used against him. Toshinori clarified, "There's a difference between going plus ultra and going beyond what is healthy. Your body needs rest to rebuild your muscles. The more you work out without proper rest time is going to hurt you in the long run, and I'm not just talking about your body. Your quirk also needs rest. Do you understand?" Izuku glanced down in shame at being reprimanded, but he knew All Might was telling the truth. "I understand," said Izuku. "I'll take a break then get back on this pile." "No," Izuku looked directly at his tutor. "You need a lot more than a break. Head home and relax. Watch some videos, read a book, take a nap, whatever. Just give your body some rest for the night. I'll have to rework your schedule, but tomorrow, we'll be back making progress." Izuku knew he was lying to himself when he wanted to object and say he didn't have to go home just yet. Those trash bags demonstrated how his telekinesis weakened with increasing fatigue. Before he heard his mentor's voice, Izuku followed him back to the road where his belongings were, his head hanging low. Turning to the man with the sunken eyes, Izuku said, "Hey, you've been making good progress. Don't burn yourself out just to prove to someone that you're enough." Izuku tried to absorb it as he stood there. Was he attempting to establish his worth? To whom? To all power? To Kachan? To himself? Izuku gave a nod and headed home. But, in the end, the boy was able to overcome himself and accomplish his labor. Izuku sat with a view of the shore from the side of the road. Sweat stained his clothing, and he was battered. He gushed a lot of water from his bottle. Izuku wiped his lips and grinned happily at his diligence. Izuku brings Izuku to a stunned Toshinori with the sound of footsteps. Izuku cleaned up the remainder of the rubbish on the beach in the early morning before he got there. Dagoba Beach was now immaculate, a condition it hadn't been in for many years. Izuku couldn't help but be in awe of the beach's natural beauty as well as the fact that he was responsible for its restoration. Izuku's occasional pride in his accomplishments couldn't be all that horrible. "My boy," Toshinori said at last, this is. With a shout, All Might transformed into his hero form. "This is incredible." A sincere smile appeared on Izuku's face. "Yeah, I wanted to surprise you today. I was already nearly done," Izuku replied. "Indeed, you were," said All Might, "and a whole week before the entrance exam." To be honest, Izuku could have used his quirk to accomplish it sooner if he hadn't overworked himself. As the teacher and student watched the dawn rise together, Izuku nodded. His throat is cleared by All Might. "Izuku, I want to be open with you. I haven't been fully truthful about my intentions." Izuku gazed in astonishment at the symbol of peace. "Don't get me wrong, I fully intended to train you after seeing you start out here. I was willing to help you out, plus it would be experience for my upcoming teaching career at UA. All Might had said that he will be teaching at UA this term, and Izuku remembered that. He would typically be thrilled to hear that his idol was a teacher at the same school that he attended. However, Izuku grew accustomed to the presence of Japan's #1 hero after months of working with and learning from the man. All Might acknowledged, secretly, I've been OBERSVING and testing you, young MIDORYIA. The truth is I was wondering if you would be a worthy SUCESSOR to me. Izuku's attention was immediately drawn to that. He? As All Might's successor? Izuku implored the hero to clarify, asking, All Might, sir, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. The symbol of peace took a deep breath and said, there is something about my quirk you should know. Not only does my quirk give me tremendous strength and power, it can also be passed on. Izuku didn't remain silent. How could he have made such a significant revelation? All Might clarified, not in a FAMIAL sense, but in a literal sense, it is possible for me to transfer my quiz to whomever I choose. In fact, this is the reason it is called One for All. His eyes became more nostalgic. My master passed this quirk down to me when I was your age. And her master did the same to her. And so on and so on. Generations of men and women have used this quirk to protect the innocent and fight evil. All Might shook his head to emphasize that only those who exhibit strong heroic qualities are worthy of such power and responsibility. Not just anyone is CHOOSEN to wield such power, he said. And you, Izuku MIDOYRIA. All Might indicated his pupil with a dramatic gesture. I believe you hold such qualities. I know you've earned it through all your hard work and training. And if my master were still here, I believe she would say the same as well. Izuku MIDORYIA. Will you accept my quirk? To carry on the League CY of One for All and become a true hero? All Might was over? If the phrase, flabbergasted, is accurate, Izuku sat there. His mind was racing with so many ideas. Did Might inherit all of his quirks? And Izuku may inherit it from him? All Might believed that Izuku, who was once quirkless but was now apprehensive, bashful, and mumbling, was a good successor. It was unbelievable. It was like having a lucid dream. Stuttering, I don't know what to say, Izuku said. Assuring him, I know it's a lot, but take your time, All Might said. It's not like you have the entrance exam today. That would be so much worse on your DECESION making. Izuku gave it careful thinking. His desire was to be like All Might, and with All Might's quirk, what could be better? The ability to smile confidently while saving everyone. Demonstrating to the world that Izuku's presence meant they were safe. However, those thoughts were not the only thing present. He had some doubts about it. Well, first, I want to say I'm honored you even considered making me your successor, Izuku remarked quickly. I mean, even training under you has been a dream, and this is some major news. Everyone might have started to perspire. You do understand you will have to keep all of what I just said a secret, right? This is some big stuff I just shared with you. Crossing his arms, Izuku said, I know. I promise not to tell a soul before spreading them wide. Izuku sighed, it's just, I'm thinking. I'm going to have to decline. All Might stumbled. Are you sure? Don't get me wrong. I'm extremely humbled by you making me your successor. I'm serious, Izuku said. It's just, well. Izuku sighed once again. 10 months ago, I didn't even have my own quirk. I was told by mostly everyone that I couldn't be a hero without a quirk. Then, I got one. Sure, it was from something underground, but it was mine, you know. Izuku turned to face his hands, which were the source of his power. All these months of training gave me more appreciation for my quirk. Not only was it mine, I was good with it. I know how to use it. I feel good about myself. Izuku glanced across at his teacher. I guess it's a matter of pride, but I don't see it that way. This is the way I can go for myself. Something I can achieve for with my own power. Be the hero I always wanted to be. Once again, I'm sorry for saying no, but this is something I want to do for myself. Like a learner bowing to a master, Izuku bowed to All Might. I cannot thank you enough for all you help. I don't think I can ever repay for this, except for one thing. Izuku got to his feet, resolute and powerful. By being the hero that can stand alongside you. That can bring hope and safety to the people just like you. The perpetual smile of All Might faded. That is a very inspiring SPPECH, young MIDORYIA, but are you sure you don't want to reconsider your DECESION? No thank you, I'm good. Izuku stooped to retrieve his last belongings. I hope you'll find a successor with all the qualities you see in me. And I hope we'll meet each other again at UA. Good luck. Izuku turned and began to walk away after saying that. only turning to wave goodbye to the number one hero. All Might waved back, and to you as well, young Midoyria, as Izuku entered the early morning light. Blood spurted from All Might's mouth as he drew back down, certain that Izuku couldn't hear him. Ah, shit, Toshinori swore, frantically scratching his head. Damn it. How could I've let this happen? The symbol of peace started to quarrel with himself while pacing the area. I had him right there, why didn't I stop him? What would I do? Shove a piece of hair down his throat and hope he won't choke? You just stood there like a dumbass while he did his big speech. You could have interrupted him, make counter-arguments, anything. Of course, Nezu, I'll be able to find a successor before the semester starts. It won't be that hard. You're an idiot, Toshi. An idiot. Arg. Toshinori moaned and sat down on the group. In defeat, he clasped his head in his hands. Well, there goes my plan. With another groan, he lowered his hands. Maybe I should give Night Eye a call and see if this Mirio kid lives up to the hype. Then Toshinori stood up and started walking away from Izuku. Wide awake, Izuku lay in bed. The UA entrance exam was held today. It was several hours before he had to board the trains to get to UA, let alone when he needed to wake up, according to his All Might alarm clock. Izuku awoke ahead of both his mother and the sun. Izuku threw a ball into the air for whatever long. He alternated between using his hands to catch it and his telekinesis to catch it before throwing it back up. Was he anxious? He was, of course. This test determined whether or not his ambition of being a hero could come true. Izuku was aware that he needed to sleep, but he was unable to return. Izuku groaned and dropped the ball into his hand. Still, it was close enough to begin preparing. He got out of bed and began his morning ritual. Izuku ultimately joined his mother for breakfast, despite rising early. Small chat and pleasantries were exchanged. For them, that was typical. It served as a little reprieve before Izuku had to face his upcoming trial. Before he departed, Inko embraced her child and said she will always be proud of her son, regardless of whether he gets in or not. The child walked to the train station after being hugged and crying. UA. Japan's and probably the world's most respected school. All of the heroes that have ranked in the top 10 have passed through these corridors. And Izuku knew that this might be the beginning of his hero career as he gazed up at the H-shaped skyscraper in wonder. Izuku sensed that he was being pushed aside from behind. Izuku rubbed his wounded arm and let out a little cry of anguish before turning to see a very familiar friend. Kachan gave Izuku a fierce glance and said, "What the hell are you doing here, Deku?" Izuku had to force himself not to freeze completely under his old friend's gaze. "I'm here to take the entrance exam, same as you, Kachan." Izuku observed Kachan's hand curl up, which was a clear indication that he was going to use his quirk to blast Izuku. But the boy with the explosives put it down. "Whatever," scoffing, Kachan said. "Don't get in my way, and maybe these old-timers will send you home when they realize how worthless you are." The boy then turned on his heel, tucked his hands in his pockets, and left. Izuku released a breath he was unaware he had been holding. Kachan would have been able to teach Izuku not to mess with him back in Aldrea by freely using his quirk. Now that so many people were observing and evaluating Izuku, there was too much on the line for Kachan to treat him roughly. Izuku released a breath he had been suppressing. Before he had even entered, he had already reverted to his previous behaviors. He couldn't let his history with Kachan to affect him at this time. He was not the quirkless, terrified youngster who had witnessed the burning of his notes almost a year prior. Heroes are created here, and Izuku now possessed the strength and training to turn it into a reality. He only needed to enter via those doors. Izuku advanced a step. And fell on himself right away. At first, Izuku thought this was embarrassing. He had hardly had time to prepare himself before he was embarrassing himself. His second concern was that when he landed on the ground, his face would be damaged. Izuku's initial reaction was to use his hands to try to catch himself or to use his quirk to propel himself back up. He felt someone slap his back, which caused him to stop falling. Izuku had already floated, but just once. He felt his own quirk encircle him when he attempted to fly. This was not like the others. He drifted, feeling nothing around him. Around him, it seemed as though someone had switched off gravity. "Oh, my goodness, I should have asked first before using my quirk, but I didn't want to see you get hurt." A fresh voice yelled behind him. Izuku was pushed back to his feet by a hand, but gravity reaffirmed itself and he plummeted to his feet. In addition to being a girl, Izuku's hero was also adorable. 2 bangs hung down on either side of her face, and her cinnamon hair was styled in a bob cut. Her large brown eyes gleamed with concern. This girl would be a strong candidate for cuteness if she added cheeks that any adoring grandmother would want to squeeze. In addition, she was almost directly in front of him. Don't worry about it. Thanks for helping me, was what Izuku intended to say, but instead he spoke incoherently. Izuku would have scolded himself for his foolishness if he had been rational. It didn't appear to bother the girl. Her statement, let me guess, nervous about the exam, was more of a declaration than a query. Don't worry, I'm sure we'll both do fine. See you inside. Izuku was left standing in the courtyard, dumbfounded, as the girl departed for the building. As he stood there, our future hero in training had just one thought on his mind. Oh my god, I actually talked to a girl. Izuku waited for any announcements after entering and finding his seat, which was regrettably near Dekachan. Fortunately, a live broadcast quickly emerged on the TVs that were suspended over the incoming pupils. How are we doing this morning, everybody? Can I get a, hey, yeah? A man with a lot of energy and volume came up on the screens above. This was Present Mike, the voice hero, dressed like a DJ, with crescent-shaped blonde hair and sunglasses. Unfortunately, nobody cared to try to mobilize people again. Izuku surmised that the majority of people were either socially anxious about not fitting in, shy, or simply not morning people. For Izuku, who used to listen to Present Mike's podcast virtually daily, this was still incredible. However, Kachan did call out his mumbling. Present Mike merely rolled his eyes at the kid's lack of enthusiasm. All right, he said. With that out of the way, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the exam. Present Mike's voice became quieter, but it was still enthusiastic. First, all you listeners will take a written exam. You all got around an hour and a half to finish. After that, you'll take a 15-minute break while you gear up before loading up on a bus to go to the practical exam. The scene changed to images of a city in the city. The practical exam consists of locating and destroying robotic villains. These malevolent machines are worth points valuing from 1 to 3. Be warned, the higher the point value, the tougher these bots will be. The crowd erupted in a hand. Present Mike gestured toward the hand and said, yes, curious caller. It belonged to a young man with a powerful physique. His spectacles and mediocre haircut, however, gave him the look of a submissive student or bookworm. The youngster, I have a question on the villains, answered. You have described 3 types of villains, however on the printout, it lists 4, surely a highly qualified school such as UA would not overlook such a simple mistake. The youngster said, and you, pointing directly at Izuku. You've been muttering this entire time. It is quite disrespectful, and I would like to ask you to stop. Man, has Izuku been acting that way all along? He felt Kachan roaring behind him and squeezed his mouth shut. Present Mike went on, that'll be explained shortly, curious caller, with the same zeal as previously. You see, our 4th type of villain is called a zero-pointer. It isn't worth any points and is more of an obstacle than an enemy. Glasses said, ah, I understand, and bowed. I apologize for my earlier outburst. The boy was reassured by Present Mike. No worries, lucky listener. Any other questions? No one raised their voice. Now, you should have been given packets detailing where you'll be taking the tests. And before you all storm out of here, I want to drop some words of wisdom on you all. The great hero Napoleon Bonaparte once said, true heroism consists in being superior to the ills of life. Plus ultra, everybody, break a leg. Izuku located the leaflet and began walking toward the exam rooms. Now there was no going back. Izuku was surprised by how easy the written exam was compared to his expectations. It wasn't easy, to be sure, but it was much simpler than Izuku had feared. Izuku took a pause to change into his gym clothes and relax after passing the written exam. He then boarded a bus that would transport him and the other exam takers to a location known as Ground Beta. Luckily, Kachan would not accompany Izuku to the testing location. Izuku heard that in order to avoid any alliances from forming on the practical exam, the teachers separated students who attended the same school. By all measures, the test location was impressive. UA's faculties are a miniature version of a metropolis. Izuku and the other participants gazed in wonder. Behind a blue barrier that separated them from the city, they were all standing. Before the test, most other children were stretching or attempting to get themselves in the right frame of mind. Izuku saw that the girl from earlier was alone. She appeared anxious, or at least made an effort to hide it. A touch on Izuku's shoulder stopped him before he could speak with her. The glasses guy once again gave Izuku a harsh look and asked, are you trying to distract that young lady? Izuku stumbled, well no, before the glasses guy cut him off. She is trying to concentrate on the exam. I would rather you not be a distraction like you were earlier, but maybe it's just who you are. If that didn't embarrass Izuku, then his fellow testers' jeers and dismissals did it for him. Many had already blown off Izuku because he was anxious, which made things worse. Present Mike shortly made the announcement that the test will begin. The majority of individuals either focused or assumed a running position. They weren't prepared for the test to start with no countdown at all. Present Mike barked, "There's no countdowns in real life, kids. Go, go, go." From behind the blue line, a wave of individuals rushed out, dispersing around the city. Izuku had little control over his telekinesis, which would have made him appear uncontrollable to the judges. Nevertheless, he could have used it to fly. As an alternative, Izuku and the other test-takers ran to the city. Izuku didn't see his first robot until about a minute into it. It was identified as a one-pointer due to its diminutive size and the number 1 printed on its chest. Izuku had two options. He could use his telekinesis to shatter the robot after picking it up, or he could throw other debris at it if he was unable to do so. Izuku was taken aback when he was able to effortlessly raise the one-pointer with his quirk because he was unaware of its weight. Then Izuku completely destroyed the one-pointer by smashing it against the floor. Having something to use his quirk to demolish made Izuku happy. It was okay to move things, but there was a certain primordial joy in using your own strength to crush things. As the test went on, Izuku came across an increasing number of robots. It was really simple to demolish the one-pointers. The two-pointers were more problematic, however they might be flung concrete chucks or crushed inside Izuku's telekinetic field. Izuku couldn't lift the three-pointers since they were too hefty and as tall as two-story skyscrapers. Fortunately, the demolished remnants of one-pointers turned out to be valuable ammunition for defeating these mechanical giants. Izuku discovered that, in spite of his robot trashing, he should have worked on his physical speed more. In terms of athletic ability or quirks, a sizable portion of the other test-takers were quicker than him. This implied that these students either destroyed robots before Izuku could reach them or deprived Izuku of a point by destroying a robot he was going to assault. Izuku was holding a two-pointer when a French-speaking child used a laser from his belly button to cut it in half. No matter how much Present Mike counted down the minutes, it just served to prolong the sense of chaos and unrest that appeared to go on forever. Izuku saw destroyed buildings, robots, and other players destroying robots or fleeing to other areas of the city everywhere he looked. Even worse was the fact that he was growing tired. Even though his quirk never hurt, he could already feel his lungs burning and his ability to hold objects steadily eroding. Even worse, Izuku lost track of how many points he had accrued. He had no idea how many points anyone else had accrued. Anxiety started to rise within him. What if he received insufficient points? Present Mike's announcement cut through his thoughts. "All right, kids. Time for the big one." Everyone on the street level was startled as the ground trembled. Izuku turned to watch the enormous object emerge from the earth. It was a gigantic. The number 0 is displayed on the chest of a kaiju-sized robot. Its mechanical arms were destroying random houses as its treads went along the street. 0-pointer. Izuku wanted to run, but he was frozen by his own terror. Quicker on their feet, the other test-takers were already running away from the robot. He snapped to the source as he heard a cry of anguish. The girl from previously was there. Under some debris, her lower body was stuck. No one stopped to assist her. They cared too much about avoiding the 0-pointer's path. Izuku saw a fleeting sight of the glasses guy rushing straight past the female, who looked like he had motors in his calves. Izuku couldn't stop his legs from sprinting in the direction of the girl, even though he knew it would be more practical for him to flee as well. Izuku persevered through blind dread and reached the girl despite their protests and cries. He attempted to remove the debris off her, but it took longer than usual due to his deteriorating telekinesis. The 0-pointer was almost on top of them, the girl had noted. Izuku was horrified as she stood there. There was not enough strength left for him to get the rubble off her in time. Izuku was forced to leave the girl because he was afraid. No, a voice within him said. Their lack of strength prevented them from allowing this girl to be harmed. No matter how difficult it may be, a great hero never abandons anyone. Izuku seemed to be taken over by something. The terror vanished, and righteous rage took its place. Izuku experienced a surge of power from his quirk. Heroic aim and resolve overshadowed any suffering or fatigue. Curling his palm into a fist, Izuku cocked his arm back. All Might's words reverberated in his mind. Using all of his telekinetic energy, he imitated his arm. With a loud yell, Izuku pushed his fist forward, summoning his inner All Might. Smash! The impact was immediate. The zero-pointer responded as though it had been hit in the face with an uppercut. Its chin and the majority of its head were in ruins. The robot's front treads were lifted slightly off the ground by the force of the telekinetic hit. The zero-pointer fell on its backs and was finished by gravity. Izuku only managed to save himself with his knees and elbows as he dropped after that powerful super attack. Fighting through the fatigue, his entire body hurt and his head felt foggy. He hardly heard the girl emerge from the wreckage and approach him for assistance. His ringing head barely heard the girl's frantic cries. "Oh my God, are you okay? Your nose is bleeding." He felt for blood with 2 fingers under his nose. He must have been bleeding. Izuku got up shakily. "I'm fine." Izuku attempted to reassure the girl he had managed to save. "Are you okay?" As Izuku observed the girl seated with one foot raised in the air, his vision became more distinct. "I think I sprained my ankle," the girl replied. "What about you? That nosebleed looks serious." "I'm fine," said Izuku again. "Is the exam still going?" "Actually, it finished after you knocked down the zero-pointer. That was pretty impressive, by the way." Izuku grinned feebly. "Thanks." Izuku was asked hesitantly by the girl, "Can you help carry me over to the medics?" He would have frozen in hormonal embarrassment about carrying a daughter if he had been sane at the time. But he didn't care since he was so numb. An old voice shouted out to them before he could move. When both teenagers turned, they saw a little elderly woman wearing a superhero suit and medical equipment. Despite his extremely worn-out mind, Izuku was able to identify her as the youthful heroine, Recovery Girl. Recover Girl said, "Hello, sweeties," as if they were 2 of her grandkids. She took out 2 cotton-like rods from a case. She looked across at Izuku. "Here, uses these to plug up that awful nosebleed of yours." Izuku complied with her directives and adhered to the rods in each nostril. He didn't realize until now how much blood was dripping from his face and onto the floor. Unlike when he originally acquired his abilities, he at least did not completely ruin his clothes. "Hold still, dear," Recovery Girl said, kissing Izuku with enormously inflated lips. He'd have panicked out if he was still mentally all there. However, he was fortunate to still remain upright and didn't respond at all because his already low stamina was suddenly significantly more depleted. The girl said, "What did you do?" Recover Girl clarified, "It's part of my quirk. That young man will eventually become exhausted since my kisses speed up the body's natural healing process, which does need the body's energy." Izuku's fog was beginning to lift, and even in his confused state of tiredness, his mind was already taking notes. "How about you, sweetheart?" The girl Izuku saved was questioned by Recovery Girl. "Oh, I have a sore ankle." The girl clarified, "I think I sprained it. I'm also a little woozy from using my quirk." "Let me see that ankle." When a few seconds, the girl was able to walk on both feet when the girl moved the wounded part over to Recovery Girl and the heroine used her quirk on her, which caused a greater reaction from the girl than Izuku did. "Young man, if you would please," Recovery Girl said, extending her hand. Izuku took out the 2 blood-soaked rods and handed them to the heroine. He felt around his nose, relieved that the bleeding had stopped, but irritated by the blood that was still caked in his nostrils. The Recovery Girl took some snacks out of one of her pouches and said, "And before you go, here are some gummies for being such good kids. They taste delicious and will help you regain your energy." After eating the goodies as instructed, Izuku and the girl felt their energy returning, and they waved Recovery Girl off as they left the premises. As they walked side by side, Izuku turned to the girl and said, "Hey, thanks for helping me out back there. It was a kind gesture even if the teachers didn't want us to suffer too much." Izuku reddened and pressed his forehead together. "It wasn't nothing at all," he said. "I moved kind of by myself. Furthermore, my actions weren't really noteworthy." "It was, indeed. You removed the zero-pointer on your own," the girl disputes. "That's incredible. But even if you got that nasty nosebleed for it, comes after a pause." Izuku said, "Yeah, it's a drawback of my quirk. I get those nosebleeds if I use it too much. Although it doesn't hurt, I suppose it's very disgusting. If it's okay with you, may I inquire what your quirk is?" "It's telekinesis. I create a field that allows me to toss and move objects. Although it's not as strong, my mom has something comparable. How about yours? You said that you were feeling woozy." "Oh, so you are aware of how I prevented you from falling earlier? Well, my quirk allows me to cancel gravity in anything I touch with all 5 fingers, Izuku said, nodding, still feeling ashamed over tripping in the first place. She held up her hand, each finger and thumb bearing a bean-like growth. "I have a weight limit on how many things I can float with my quirk," the girl said, wincing in shame. The queasiness is a side effect of my quirk. I throw up if I cross that threshold. That's really disgusting. Near the entryway, the two laughed lightly off the frequent embarrassing side effects of using quirk. Hey, we've arrived. Izuku yelled out to the girl, who was about to run off to reassemble with the others when she exclaimed. Hey, now or never, she said, turning to face him. What's your name? She said, Uraraka, Ochako Uraraka. My name's Midoriya. Izuku stumbled out in response. Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you, Midoriya, said Ochako with a smile. I hope both of us are admitted. Izuku returned the smile, wishing they could both get in. A week had passed since the entrance exam, and Izuku had been anxiously anticipating and dreading this day. Although Ua had stated that test results would be available in a week, the wait was excruciating, and Izuku, being the worried, anxious teenager that he was, conjectured about every scenario that might occur. Would he lose points for destroying the zero-pointer, which was supposed to be an obstacle? What if he was in the general courses? Did he get in the hero course? What if he didn't receive any points? Well, that one wasn't so awful. The general course might teach him how to use his skills in other areas of life, such as a salaryman, even though it wasn't the course to become a hero, which was his childhood ambition. Upon reflection, Izuku sincerely wished he was not accepted into the general course. Izuku was idly looking through social media and turning through the channels on the couch when his mother smiled as she entered his apartment through the open door. Izuku. There's a letter for you, he was called to by his mother. Izuku tore the letter and searched inside, pulling out a disc instead of a paper. The youngster turned and accepted the letter, and his mother sat down on the couch beside him. The letter was just like any other professional letter in Japan, except that it had the Ua seal. He fumbled with it until the disc came to life and a holographic image of All Might appeared, but it was an impressive disc that didn't look like anything that could be connected into his computer or phone. I'm present, the All Might miniature declared, as a recording. Dumbfounded, Izuku looked, wondering why All Might was there. I'm sure you're wondering why I'm showing your results. To be honest, in addition to my frequent hero patrols, I am sharing my knowledge and expertise with upcoming hero generations, Hollow All Might stated. You're looking at one of the newest faculty members at UA. Even though Izuku was previously aware of All Might's teaching position, hearing it felt surreal, and Izuku was beginning to suspect that All Might have been reading from a script, but that didn't lessen how great it was. And I'm really pleased with who you've grown into. You've come a long way from that kid I met almost a year ago, All Might said earnestly, referring to all that you accomplished in such a short period of time. Izuku Midoriya, I'm happy to have met you. All right. Izuku wasn't ashamed to say that he started crying at that. Well, what is that? Are we running out of time? All Might turned to see someone off screen. All right, I'll expedite it. All Might came back to confront Izuku. Congratulations on your scores. You received a 93.7% on the written test. Among the best results this year, well done. Izuku did not resist his mother's joyful embrace, but he was unable to stop it. On to the practical test now. A total of 27 villain points were awarded to you. This would have hardly removed you off the overall course on its own. Even though Izuku had been accepted to the school of his dreams, his future as a hero was hanging in the balance, and he was unaware of how low his score had fallen. However, your story doesn't finish here. Look at this. The hologram All Might interjected. All Might was followed by a second screen that played recorded video of Izuku charging in and attempting to save Uraraka, followed by a cut to him taking down the zero-pointer on his own. A real hero does more than defeat evildoers. They must also be motivated to defend and rescue their fellow humans. And that is the kind of quality that we at UA are constantly searching for in our students. What sort of hero school, after all, would overlook one of the core principles of heroism? To do it, a group of judges awards rescue points for valiant deeds. Additionally, you have 48 rescue points, Izuku Midoriya. As the screen shifted to the top 10 applicants of the entrance exam, Izuku was sitting in second place, directly beneath Kachan, who had 77 villain points and 0 rescue points. If that wasn't remarkable, Izuku didn't know what was. A flashing 48 appeared on the screen next to All Might. You not only qualified, but you aced the test with your overall aggregate score. Stand proud, Izuku Midoriya, for you have proven yourself to walk these halls of heroes, All Might said, praising the small child. Greetings from your academic hero. Izuku's favorite meal, katsudon, was served for dinner, and after everything, Izuku went to bed that night feeling proud and full of hope for what the future might hold. The Midoriya household was filled with cheers and tears from both mother and son. A dream that had seemed impossible only a short time ago was now a reality. Izuku thought, plus ultra, as he fell asleep. Izuku hadn't even set foot on the UA campus when he faced his biggest obstacle to date, not grades, Kachan, or even a villain, but something far more subtle, and his worst opponent was a tie. A tie, indeed. Izuku Midoriya never had to wear a tie before today. Not at school, not at any formal event, nothing. Why did it take until the first day of school for Izuku to learn how to tie a tie? He spent more than 10 minutes attempting to make that pointless accessory at least look respectable. However, it would have been great to know about tie-tying in advance. The rest of the UA uniform was alright. It was a little more formal than his previous school uniforms, but that was to be expected from the nation's most prominent hero school. Izuku was standing directly in front of the UA doors, though, and his first impression was that the entrance was enormous. He surmised that some of the faculty and students had quirks that made them taller than others, so the doors had to be bigger. The students who were glancing at him informed Izuku that he was mumbling once more and that he had to enter. Izuku looked around the hallways for Class 1A. He needed some help from the older students, but he finally found the door marked 1A. Izuku made a small wish before opening the door, knowing that Kachan had obviously gotten in, hoping that they wouldn't be in the same class as before and that they would start over, away from the horror that is middle school. Oh, and he kind of hoped that the glasses guy wasn't in his class too. He was fairly certain that the glasses guy was a nice guy, but he was a little too intense for Izuku. He took a deep breath in and out before opening the door. I insist that you immediately get up from your desk. The school property is being disrespected by you. Oh, so you believe you can exert pressure on others? Extra, where exactly are you from? Oh no, there was the guy with the glasses and Kachan. Well, Tenya Iida is my name. Same Academy was where I went to school before. The glasses guy introduced himself to Kachan. Oh, a student at a private school? Perhaps I should bury you, Kachan thought, to prevent you from developing conceited notions that you were superior to me. Bury me. What kind of hero threatens another classmate like that? Exclaimed Iida in disbelief. Are you certain that you're in the correct location at all? All right, Izuku thought, perhaps they won't notice me if I get to my desk in silence. Kachan noticed Izuku before he had even moved a few paces from the door. Deku. What on earth are you doing in this place? Kachan shouted. Izuku answered shakily, fighting his anxiety. Kachan, I got in. The same as you. Izuku maintained her bravery despite Kachan's stare. You nerd, I already know that. What the devil did you do to get in? Kachan shot back. Iida stepped forward in front of Kachan and swiftly extended his hand to shake before Izuku could respond. Hi there, Tenya Iida is my name. Iida gave an enthusiastic response. Why yeah, I heard, Izuku added, raising his hand. My name is Izuku Midoriya. Stop ignoring me, Kachan shouted behind Iida. I must apologize first, Iida said, lowering his hand. For what purpose? Izuku inquired. You were able to determine the actual purpose of the test and the characteristics of rescue points during the admission exam. Iida bowed respectfully and said, I admit that you were the superior hero, but I didn't realize that. I respectfully beg your pardon for my previous statements and deeds against you. Izuku felt a little uncomfortable, but not ashamed. Izuku waved timidly, that's okay, accepting Iida's apology. Good, oh, Kachan chose to re-enter the discussion. Now that Spectacle has finished his stupid apology, Oh, Midoriya. Izuku turned around to find Iida grinning and Uraraka coming toward him. Uraraka wrote, it's amazing that we're in the same class. God damn it. Kachan shouted with exasperation. Hello, I'm Tenya Iida and I am from... Oh yeah, I remember you, Uraraka laughed. We were all in the same test site together. Well, that is accurate, Iida said, losing some of his temper. On behalf of the class, I welcome you two to UA. How did you two meet, if you don't mind? Oh, it's simple. I saved Midoriya from collapsing outside the school, which is how we first met. Izuku blushed with shame at the recollection. Then he saved me back in the admission exam, Uraraka went on. You ought to have seen it. It was awesome. Izuku stopped the zero-pointer when I was imprisoned. I mean, I didn't do that much, Izuku said meekly in an attempt to shift the attack. You certainly did. Uraraka gestured at Izuku, saying, he removed the zero-pointer by himself, and in a single blow, too. Izuku was the talk of the class, and even though he didn't know any of these people, he was now the talk of the day. Izuku saw Kachan from behind Iida. looking confused and angry, not only because he didn't want to be the focus of his peers, but also because he didn't understand how quirkless Izuku could defeat the zero-pointer, in his opinion. As the mumblings went on, the door crashed open, and everyone turned to see a bright yellow pod standing at the entryway, its face disheveled and exhausted where the head should have been. You all took about 8 seconds to stop talking. That isn't going to work. The pod dropped to the ground and scuttled like a worm to the desk, and as it rose, the class gaped in disbelief, and now that Izuku could see it more clearly, it resembled a sleeping bag. Wearing a long scarf over a black bodysuit, the sleeping bag unzipped to reveal a weary-looking man with long, stringy black hair, an almost opaque 5 o'clock shadow, and noticeable bags under his eyes. He took out one of those name tags with the teacher's name on it and placed it on the desk. "My name is Aizawa Shota. This year, I'm your homeroom teacher," Aizawa said. Izuku and the rest of the class only gazed in disbelief. If Izuku had telepathy, he would have assumed that his classmates' thoughts would have been, "Is this person our teacher?" Since this individual appeared to be receiving a better sleep routine than lecturing, Izuku was already beginning to have his concerns. Several pairs of clothes were in a box that Aizawa picked up and laid on his desk. "Put these on and then meet me on the training grounds," Aizawa said, adding, "What are you waiting for? Go ahead and do it." Everyone rushed to get a uniform as he departed, and Izuku was anxious about how quickly Mr. Aizawa was moving things as he grabbed his and followed the others to the locker room. Perhaps he was simply not a morning person. A few days prior to that, Shota Aizawa did not enjoy getting up early. His job as an underground hero meant that he spent most of his nights hunting down the villains that aren't on television, the cunning ones that take advantage of the weak in the most heinous ways possible, be it kidnappings, drug cartels, human trafficking, or anything else. However, this wasn't about his nighttime activities, rather, it was about his new day job as a homeroom teacher for UA, and for some reason, he now had to be in a small meeting room with All Might and the UA principal. When All Might fully enrolled as a member of the UA staff, the other teachers, including Aizawa, were informed of All Might's injuries, so it was not surprising that Aizawa was sitting with the #1 hero's true form of an emancipated shell. Aizawa would admit that he didn't particularly like the image of All Might as an unbeatable symbol of good, but he did admit that he admired the man's heroic drive and tenacity. Nezu, the principal of UA, was an anthropomorphic animal with white fur and a large scar along his right eye. He was special because he was one of the few animals born with a quirk, which is enhanced intelligence and sentience. Regardless of whether his species was a dog, a bear, or a rodent, what mattered was that Nezu was the principal of UA. Beneath his adorable appearance, Nezu had the intelligence and power to change society if he so desired. Nezu called Aizawa, "Hello, Eraser Head," using his hero name. All Might nodded and said, "Greetings, Eraser Head. Is there a reason you asked us to be here so early?" Aizawa questioned, sitting down without even trying to greet them. Nezu replied, "Yes, I did. In fact, this is about one of your upcoming students." He took out the top file from a folder and passed it to Aizawa. It was a medical listing for a little kid named Izuku Midoriya, who had freckles, puffy green hair, and the body language of someone who was afraid of everything. His quirk had no formal term, it just said that he had a telekinetic quirk and its characteristics. "So, this is the one we have to talk about," Aizawa said, raising an eyebrow. "Is there anything specific I should see?" "I take it that you read about his quirk?" Nezu's head cocked. "To begin with, it lacks a suitable name. Only a telekinetic quirk is mentioned. With his mind, Midoriya can freely move items. The disadvantage is that he will develop nosebleeds if he goes overboard." "That seems rather typical, doesn't it?" Nezu's behavior, which Aizawa detested, indicated that the rat was holding back on revealing the huge secret because it knew something that everyone else did not. "Well, I find it odd that nearly a year ago, Midoriya's medical records were mostly the same, save for one small difference." Nezu handed Aizawa another piece of paper, which was nearly the same as the first one until Aizawa got to the part where his quirk was written. Izuku Midoriya was listed as quirkless. Nezu sensed Aizawa's thoughts and said, "And all of young Midoriya's records state the exact same thing as the one I just handed you. And what does this mean? That Midoriya got a quirk from somewhere else?" asked Aizawa. "Nezu, you must not have conducted all of this research for a single difference. Toshinori actually brought up the issue with me," Nezu said, gesturing to All Might. "I didn't do it on a whim." The symbol of peace appeared uneasy in the Eraser hero's gaze, so Aizawa turned to face him. All Might replied, "Yes, I did. However, the situation of young Midoriya is amazing. This will need background, so I hope you don't mind a lengthy story. Nezu said, I certainly don't mind. Are you sure you won't let me leave until he tells us this? Aizawa asked the principal a question. Correct. Fine, carry on. All Might cleared his throat. It all began when I fought a villain and rescued young Midoriya. Unaware that Midoriya had held onto my leg until we were in the air, I jumped off after trapping the villain and signed the young boy's notebook. I had Midoriya swear to keep it a secret after unintentionally revealing my true form to him after landing on a rooftop. All Might inhaled, knowing without even looking up that Eraserhead was glaring at him for unintentionally showing his weaker form to a child. Midoriya questioned whether a person like him who doesn't have a quirk could be a hero. I declined, stating that without a quirk, being a pro was too risky. In hindsight, it was wrong to so ruthlessly destroy his dreams. You were right, Aizawa cut in, it would have been best if he had been quirkless, as you say. The child, based on my observations, hardly exercised before acquiring his quirk. Midoriya needed an outside force to motivate him because he doesn't seem to be the type to take initiative on his own. He had little chance of becoming a hero if he based his desire to be one only on his fantasies. All Might stiffened, unwilling to admit that Eraserhead had some merit, and Nezu gestured silently for All Might to go on. Well, we parted ways after I managed to get him safely onto the streets. I didn't run into him again until a week later. In order to develop his physique and his new quirk, Midoriya was cleaning up Dagoba Beach by himself. Nezu's paw prevented Aizawa from getting the clarification he sought. I had the chance to apologize when I saw him, and I was struck by the boy's determination to improve both for the community and himself. Still believing he was the quirkless youngster I had rescued, I volunteered to train him. He proved to me I was mistaken. Looking at Aizawa, All Might said, remember the boogeyman? Which one? Aizawa retorted. The one which was told by mothers to get kids to listen to them by saying if they acted up, the boogeyman would take their quirks in their sleep and give them to someone else. Aizawa nodded, recalling the same bedtime tale he had heard as a child. Well, the boogeyman is real, the mighty said, and I killed him 3 years ago. So, you believe that one of the most notorious Japanese criminals, whom you personally executed, gave Midoriya his quirk? Aizawa's inquiry was tinged with doubt. You wouldn't treat him lightly if you know him. Besides, he was hard to put down. There are moments when I worry that he may still be lurking in the shadows. I was so alarmed when young Midoriya told me that he had a quirk from something else. I'm worried that I encouraged a bright young man to make agreements with demons in order to blend in. And? Nezu asked. I asked him to tell me how he got his quirk, and he did. All Might braced himself for this. For better or worse, Midoriya wasn't involved with villains. Everything. It began when I fell on the ground. He wandered into Yavin National Park, devastated. He discovered a hole in the ground there. He said it was neither entirely natural nor man-made. Midoriya would later explain that the buzzing he heard when he got very close sounded more like singing. He descended into the hole and followed the singing to something, allowing his curiosity to overcome him. All Might submerged his palms. It was crystalline, but it had organic veins inside, Midoriya said. It occupied a significant amount of the space it occupied. When Midoriya touched it, it responded to the heat from his body. Aizawa had to suppress a remark about how foolish Midoriya's touching of unknown objects was. Midoriya's recollections are currently a little hazy. He does recall some suffering, but he returns to his home with telekinetic abilities, a bleeding nose, and a misplaced phone. The room was silent for a moment. You're implying that Midoriya acquired a quirk from something beneath Yavin National Park, isn't that right? And he never thought to report it at all, explained Aizawa. Clearly, he would rather keep that little fact a secret, Nezu exclaimed. After all, in strange circumstances, the government has a bit of a habit to take special individuals and keeping them locked from the outside world just to see what makes them tick. Despite the grim reality, Nezu's pleasant tone and smile remained unaffected. Nezu had first-hand experience with the possibility that the youngster would be in a government base being experimented on if Izuku had been honest about the origin of his quirk. I requested Midoriya to show me the hole where he found the thing after he told me his story, All Might went on. A park ranger stopped us when we arrived. He explained that the area was tapped off and the earth was unstable. That it was not a villain attack was confirmed by the ranger. Without park security, I took Izuku and we walked around to where we could see the clearing. The hole was covered up when we arrived. It might have been a cave-in. Even if we tried, we couldn't get down in there. Is that item still down there, as far as we know? Or, if it could, did it go? Aizawa inquired. Sitting in quiet, The three pondered whether this item of power was still beneath their feet or if it was at some other place in the globe, imposing powers on others. Nezu remarked, "It appears that the mystery of the object that gave Midoriya his powers will remain just that, a mystery. We may argue about how Midoriya uses the powers, not where they come from, for the time being. Midoriya has a strong heroic will, I can attest," remarked the mighty. "He didn't go into villainy then, and he wouldn't now. Still, we need keep an eye on him," Aizawa replied. "We have no idea if this is just a simple telekinetic quirk or something more." He glanced at Nezu. "Which is why I suspect you put him in my class." "Am I really that obvious?" Nezu grinned. "However, I do want you to keep an eye on how Midoriya's quirk evolves over time." Aizawa exhaled sharply. "I think he's just another troublemaker based on his performance on the entrance exam. Is that all, or is there more to it? You will be getting 2 of the recommendation students, Shoto Todoroki and Momo Yaoyorozu. Great, 2 wealthy children from powerful families. I hope they won't try to sue as the other ones did." With a monotone, "Oh, joy," Aizawa said. "That's all for you now," Nezu replied. "I need to do some clearing with All Might. Eraserhead, would you just go home and sleep?" Aizawa pushed himself up in his chair and said, "I've got work to do," but he left the room after saying, "But I'll find time." Nezu turned to All Might and asked, "Now, about that one for all, did you discover your candidate as you promised?" All Might scratched his head and said, "Well, Nezu, I did, but there were some complications in. Toshinori, tell me from the beginning." "I offered to train him after finding out about Midoriya's origins," All Might groaned. "After he agreed, we cleaned that beach for the following 10 months. As time went on, I noticed that Midoriya possessed many of the same heroic traits that I did. Despite his flaws, I felt he was deserving." "I feel like something else was involved," Nezu asked. "Well, I kept my quirk a secret until the day he cleared the entire beach 1 week prior to the entrance exam. Admittedly, I should have told him sooner, but I knew he was prepared." And he said no, whether it was the silence or the lack of emotion in Nezu's beady eyes, All Might was unable to decide which was worse. "No, it was Tashi's disillusioned tone. See, I tried, all right," All Might defended himself. "I truly did, but even if Midoriya's quirk was granted to him, he was determined to use it to become a hero. I was unable to bring myself into interfering with his dream once more." He heard only the small pocket of air escaping from Nezu's nostrils. Nezu responded, "Well, I'm sorry your first choice didn't work out the way you had hoped. Do you have any other choices, at least?" "Yes," All Might sagged. "Mirio, Sir Night Eye suggested a 3rd year for me. He's basically a clone of myself, which is really weird, except instead of smashing, he phases through everything." "Well, Toshi, you have at least informed young Mirio of your authority and his position as your heir." All Might turned aside in guilt. "Toshi, I haven't discovered the ideal moment, and besides, I can still do good out there and in here, even if it is for a few hours," All Might defended. Nezu clarified, "Toshi, you must understand that Mirio will require training to manage the power of One for All. It will be an entirely different way of using a quirk than he's accustomed to. Additionally, Mirio will adjust to One for All more easily the sooner you start working with him. You can't stay around forever, old friend. I understand that you may find it difficult, but you will have to pass the globe on to the next generation. Additionally, as previously stated, the sooner you begin, the better the outcome will be." Knowing that he couldn't argue his way out, All Might let out a defeated sigh. "All right, Nezu, I'll get on it. Give me a little time, please." "Yes, Toshi, I will. Just keep in mind that time is limited. Frequently, things change sooner than we anticipate." Now, amazing what a proper school budget can accomplish. After changing, everyone was outside of the grounds, wearing blue UA gym uniforms with a white U on the front, a red border on the front, and A on the back. To everyone's surprise, the uniforms fit well. Aizawa tossed a softball lightly in his hands as he paced around. Aizawa mentioned the following activities: 50-meter dash, ball throw, grip test, standing long jump, repeated side to side, seated toe touch, sit-ups, and long-distance runs. These and similar exercises were used in the physical education classes at your middle schools. Classes. Naturally, the Board of Education's demand that these assessments be standardized and that all men are created equal prevented you from using your quirks. That way of thinking is out of date and nonsensical, Aizawa said, holding onto the softball. One must be aware of their limitations, including their quirk, in order to become a hero. You will repeat these activities for your first assignment, but you will be able to apply your quirks this time. Uraraka held up her hand and said, Mr. Aizawa, sir, how about orientation? UA gives its instructors flexibility in how they conduct their lessons. In my situation, it enables me to skip unnecessary steps like orientation and start teaching right away. After looking at Kachan and Izuku, Aizawa scanned the student body before focusing on the green-haired telekinetic. What was your record pitch? Midoriya, you did decently well, said Aizawa. The unexpected attention caused Izuku to perspire. Izuku muttered, around 40 meters, sir. Aizawa didn't show it if he was covertly evaluating such a little amount. Izuku nearly caught the softball when he threw it to him. Aizawa pointed to a spot that overlooked a large field and said, do it again, only this time you can use your quirk however you like. Just don't leave that circle. Izuku swallowed. He sensed that everyone, especially Kachan, was watching him. The explosive wielder was probably angry because Aizawa was not recognizing his skills even though he had received the highest score. Izuku could almost hear Kachan snarling to himself. Izuku headed for the circle. Izuku turned to face the deserted meadow. He regulated his breathing. It would be different here. He has a peculiarity. He is proficient with it. It is not necessary for Izuku to be the useless loser that he was. He used his telekinesis to secure the softball, then released it, simply floating there. Izuku exhaled deeply. His powers imitated his throwing stance as he drew his arm back into it. He threw his arm forward with a shout of effort, sending the ball hurtling into the distance with his telekinesis. Izuku gazed with pride and delight at the vanishing ball. Izuku believed he saw his teacher's hair slipping down as he turned to view his result. In any case, it was too short to matter, and Izuku turned to his score. 675.8 meters. Quite amazing, considering Izuku never really put his abilities to the test to see how far he could throw objects. Izuku listened to his peers' many mummers, all of them were praising his quirk. Unfortunately, one noisy dissenter was always present. As he ran directly at Izuku, Kachan screamed, Deku. How the fuck did you do that? Tell me, you little. Izuku instinctively flinched and raised his fists in protection. When Izuku opened his eyes, he saw that Kachan was suspended in place by what appeared to be silver bandages, indicating that the blows never came. The blonde teenager fought to break free, asking, what the hell is this? Izuku trailed them back to their origin, his teacher's eyes blazing crimson and his hair floating. Aizawa whispered to himself, it's too early in the morning for me to be dealing with this, before stating bluntly. Now, quit this nonsense and I'll let you go. I'm already getting dry eye as it is. Realizing he couldn't fight his way out, Kachan obeyed and was released. Izuku, meantime, watched in awe as his teacher's power was displayed. The floating hair, the scarf, the goggles, and the abrupt cessation of Kachan's blasts, everything clicked. Izuku declared, oh my gosh, your eraser head, the eraser hero. Your quirk allows you to cancel out most quirks through eyesight. You're an underground hero, which means you get to avoid a lot of the publicity as other pros. Aizawa growled, apparently not enough, and then turned to face Kachan. Bakugo, pull another stunt like that again, and you'll be on the ground faster than you can blink. Understand? Kachan's nod and less combative demeanor made his response obvious even though he didn't say it out. After wiping his eyes, Aizawa looked around at the other pupils. This is what we'll be doing most of the day. Before any training can begin, one must know their own limits. Only then can you succeed. The remaining students started discussing among themselves about the chance to unleash their talents in a way they had never done before. I can't wait to get started, oh man, I am going to ace this. This is going to be so much fun. You think this is fun? Aizawa's voice made the entire situation feel much more relaxed. You all will be spending the next 3 years of your life training to become heroes, and you think it will be fun. Aizawa smiled toothily and said, okay, I'll have some fun, which completely stopped most of the kids in their tracks. Whoever places last will be expelled immediately. This decision sparked a chorus of outrage. Uraraka objected, saying, but, sir, it's only our first day. That's not fair. Natural disasters are not fair. Villain attacks are not fair. Even simple bad luck can lead to tragic accidents that are not fair, Aizawa stated. The world is full of unfairness, and the sooner you all learn that the better. A hero's job is to combat this unfairness every day. This the goal of UA. To train the next generation of heroes. And besides, this is what the school's motto is all about. Go beyond, plus ultra. And don't hold back, Aizawa said, sounding more grave. Izuku is stunned by the prospect of being kicked out. He reasoned that he couldn't merely receive a break just once. Izuku, however, promised to give it his all whatever. The 50-meter dash was the inaugural event. It was very easy. Just sprint as quickly as you can to the finish line. Izuku noted the large number of quirks on exhibit. Iida ran very rapidly, using the motors in his calves. His opponent leapt to the other side like a frog using her legs. A lot of folks also had to just run across because their quirks didn't provide them a speed boost. Izuku could have pulled himself down the track with his telekinesis, but he wasn't able to test the speed quite yet. Instead he ran after the smoke trail left by Kachan's explosions. His time of 7.02 seconds lagged well behind the majority of his peers, demonstrating his lack of speed. The grip strength test came next. Izuku saw as Shoji, a tall, white-haired boy wearing a face mask and 6 fleshy web-connected arms, grasped the machine with 3 hands and applied 540 kilograms of force. Izuku gazed at his own portable device. He never attempted to quantify his telekinesis's crushing force. Izuku raised the machine, still unsure of himself. Izuku closed his eyes and visualized the machine being squeezed like a ball by his quirk. A pleasant stress ball, really. This was effective until Izuku was startled by the sound of metal rending and dropped the machine. It turns out that his quirk actually began to crush the machine, giving it the appearance of having been briefly in a trash crusher. Even worse, only an error message was shown instead of a recorded number. Aizawa simply took Izuku's score as N.A. after he brought his malfunctioning machine to him. Izuku had to let go of his fear of flying in order to stand long. Whether it was Kachan who leapt over the pit or the French child with the belly button laser, a sizable portion of the kids were able to clear the pit in one go. Izuku used his power to raise himself above the pit when it was his turn. He made it, although it wasn't the most elegant journey. Izuku likened it to vintage film stunts in which actors used wires to fly about. Slowly, he walked over, swaying in the air. He landed on his feet, at least. Izuku also had to rely on his own physical strength for repeated side steps. He did, however, have sufficient stamina to outlast the majority of his peers. But once more, he was unable to benefit from his quickness. Particularly after witnessing a young boy bouncing between piles of purple balls composed of his own quirk. Izuku could sit this one out and watch his peers display their quirks because he was the model for the ball toss. And they did show off. They were all really awesome. Izuku made notes about each of them. To shoot the ball, one girl created a cannon out of her body. A red and white-haired boy launched the ball with a column of ice. Even Kachan performed admirably, exploding the ball and sending it flying 705.2 meters. Unfortunately, he then loudly slapped Izuku in the face with his score. Everyone was taken aback by Uraraka. Izuku was not surprised when he saw her make the ball float because he knew her quirk influenced gravity. The fact that the ball never came down at all shocked him and everyone else. Uraraka's score was marked as infinity on the scoreboard. If nothing else, none of them could surpass that. The following pair of workouts flew past. Izuku was quite doubtful that he could benefit from his quirk. After all, he unintentionally crushed the gripping machine. Did he truly wish to gain an advantage by using it on his own body? Izuku declined, and he used his own endurance to complete his exercises. Naturally, kids with greater flexibility and endurance would outperform him. The final workout involved running as far as you could. Izuku performed fairly well because the objective was endurance rather than speed. But he might not have been saved by nice. Izuku eyed the scoreboard suspiciously. The results were still being calculated, as represented by a rolling circle. The rest of the class, including himself, held their breath in anticipation. According to Aizawa, and here are the results. Izuku sighed with relief. His ranking was 11th. Yes, it wasn't the ideal location. At least he wasn't last, even though his overall score could have been higher. Poor Minoru Mineta, the little kid with the grapes on his head, was the rightful owner of the title. His other scores did not aid him at all, even though he had excellent side-to-side technique. The grape lad broke down in tears of desperation and went to his knees. Aside from a guy with a streak of lightning in his hair who made an attempt to mediocrely reassure Mineta, the other students awkwardly avoided the situation. Izuku felt conflicted. On the one hand, he was unhappy to see Mineta's hopes dashed on his first day at school. However, Izuku was relieved that he was not being expelled. As Mineta crawled pathetically and pleaded to be kept inside, Aizawa looked on indifferently. Ignoring the boy, Aizawa declared that the results were final and that the students had no recourse. Oh, and about the expulsion. One of the scariest smiles Izuku had ever seen came from Aizawa. I lied. The class let out a collective, "What?" gasp. In order to quiet the students, Aizawa held up his hand and explained. It was a logical ruse designed to push you to do your best, nothing more. Izuku turned to see Momo Yaoyuzu, the girl who created the canon, say, it was fairly obvious. Izuku actually didn't hear her voice during the earlier collective. What? I mean, he wouldn't expel one of us on the first day, right? Izuku glanced across to his homeroom instructor. Izuku suspected that Aizawa had expelled pupils in the past and would have done so with this class, but his countenance gave no clues. Aizawa issued commands, but the majority of the class was relieved that the threat of expulsion was untrue. Change back to your uniforms and then head back to homeroom. On the desk is a copy of the syllabus for each of you. You don't have anything else for the rest of the day, so go home and read up on it for tomorrow. You're dismissed. Izuku released a second breath that he was unaware he had been holding. He felt like he was being watched as he began to walk away. He turned and fought the red and white-haired ice boy. Shoto Todoroki was his name, according to the scoreboards. Todoroki and Izuku looked at each other. Izuku had more time to observe Todoroki as a result. Todoroki, for instance, had a red area surrounding his left eye. He also had symmetrical split hair, with white on the right side and red on the left. His eyes were gazing at him, and they were two different colors. Izuku was unaware of Todoroki's problem, but Todoroki turned away and walked away before he could take any action. Izuku hoped that this would be the final hostile interaction of the day. Deku. Kacchan pushed Izuku, shoving him directly in the face. So much for that hope. Kacchan said, I don't know how you got a quirk, and frankly I don't care. All you have to know is to not get in my way. I proved I was better than you even with a new quirk. So, listen carefully Deku, don't try and upstage me again. This is my hero origin, and it doesn't need some useless nerd mucking it. Got it? Izuku nodded in agreement, but he was angry. He was sick of Kacchan thinking he was worthless. He demonstrated his worthiness for being here, and he refused to allow his friend's pride and ego to be used as a justification for disparaging Izuku. Like Kacchan, Izuku had a strong and gifted quirk. A tiny voice was actually encouraging Izuku to demonstrate to Kacchan the strength of Izuku's quirk. Kacchan had already turned and departed before Izuku could do anything. Izuku exhaled all of the rage. It was odd. Although Izuku was displeased with Kacchan's actions, he never intended to harm his longtime friend. Izuku heard his name called before he could delve any farther. Uraraka was there, followed by Iida. Midoriya! Exclaimed the gravity girl. I was wondering where you were. You did pretty good out there. Izuku's face flushed from the praise. I mean, you and Iida did better than me. Indeed, though I am glad that no one got expelled. Iida replied. I understand that UA's teaching method is more freehand than other schools, but there should be something against any expulsions on the first day. Izuku attempted to find the positive side of things by saying, yeah, I think that was a bit too much. But at least we all did our best, right? Uraraka inquired, hey, do you go by Midoriya or Deku? I mean, that Bakugo guy was yelling it, and I wanted to ask first. To avoid laughing at Kacchan's moniker, Uraraka covered her mouth and said, oh, well, Deku is an old nickname Kacchan gave to me when we were kids. If you mess up the kanji in my name, it can be spelled as Deku, or useless. That is not exactly what I would call a friendly nickname, Iida said. In fact, Bakugo has been nothing but hostile to everyone else. Izuku went on, yeah, he can be like that, a lot. Uraraka said, I was thinking about it, Deku, I thought it sounds similar to Dekiru. You know, like I can do it. Izuku remarked, huh, never thought of it that way. Uraraka inquired earnestly, do you mind if I call you Deku? No, no problem at all, it sounds nice coming from you. Izuku turned aside in shame after realizing what he had just uttered. He really didn't want to look like a stop sign to the lovely girl. Iida cut the air with his arms and said, I see that despite such a short time together, you two have obviously developed a strong connection. However, I will continue to use Midoriya's name as a professional would, since we are training to become pro heroes after all. Izuku nodded, that's cool, man. Out loud. Before going their separate ways, the three of them strolled together to the station. Izuku discovered he had made true pals today on the way home. Even though things got out to a rough start, perhaps Ua would end up doing well. Aizawa waited until the students had left before turning to greet his surprise guest. He turned and saw the symbol of peace in all its glory, including its buff form. Aizawa inquired. How long were you watching? All Might said. I only got here halfway into it, but I heard enough. Now cut the crap and answer me truthfully. And what would that be? I know you were lying about faking the expulsion threat. I've read your files. You kicked out an entire class last year. I did, said Aizawa. And I also re-enrolled them within a week. Those kids were spoiled brats who thought their quirks would let them coast through life. That expulsion was a wake-up call for them, and they all took it. Were you worried about your protege failing to meet my expectations? All Might crossed his arms and said, I may have had my doubts, but I knew young Midoriya would earn his spot in this school. I know I cannot coddle him, especially after he promised to make it under his own power. Besides, what I didn't know is why you didn't expel young Mineta. He did get last after all. Honestly, I had half a mind to. He thinks with his hormones more than his brain, and it would be pessimistic of me to say he's a walking harassment lawsuit waiting to happen. However, the boy already has control of his quirk and the potential to expand it. I train kids with potential, something this class has. All I have to do is whip him up into shape and focus more on heroics than women. All Might gave his fellow teachers logic a nod. If you're wondering what I think about Midoriya, I think he has potential but a long hike to go. Aizawa replied. He looks uncomfortable with his own power. I could tell that he has the basics down but is too unsure of himself to try out different uses of his power. All Might reduced his voice once the two guys checked to make sure no one was listening. Speaking of young Midoriya, were you able to cancel his quirk? That's one of the first things I did. Usually, I'd call on the top scorer to be the example. However, I chose Midoriya instead. When he prepared to throw the ball with his power, I used my quirk. And? Inquired All Might. Aizawa scowled. It didn't work. Midoriya still used his telekinesis like nothing had happened. In contemplation, All Might clutched his chin. But what does that mean? Is young Midoriya's quirk a mutation type? That's the only type not affected by your eraser quirk? Aizawa sneered. Really? Telekinesis is a mutation type quirk? It doesn't function like a mutation type. It has all the trappings of an emitter type. Like I asked, so what? Then there's a possibility that Midoriya doesn't have a quirk. That thing you described him meeting may have mutated that child beyond our understanding. Someone quirkless, but with a power. In thinking, All Might purred. It does sound too strange to be real. Then again, quirks were once thought of as strange as well. You want me to report this to Nezu? According to Aizawa, no, I'll do it. I also want to make sure the rat keeps an eye on Midoriya. I understand your skepticism, but I cannot see Midoriya fall into villain. The boy has a heart of a hero. From what I've seen of him, I'd agree. However, we've got a child with a power that we can't control through normal means. It brings up an old quote I remember, power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. All Might shouts out to Aizawa as he begins to leave. Surely, you don't think Midoriya's own quirk would corrupt him, do you? The answer was, I don't know, Aizawa said. But I know that boy has some issues. Midoriya and Bakugo seem to have a history, with Bakugo being an aggressor and Midoriya being submissive. Call me cynical, but when someone put under that circumstance gets something to fight back, it's just a ticking time bomb before Midoriya snaps back. All Might went inside after watching Aizawa leave. He had faith that Midoriya would not let his own abilities to control him. He had a dreadful suspicion, though, that Aizawa might be more right than he would want to acknowledge. And All Might hoped that Aizawa would not be proven correct by Midoriya. Izuku had a decent first day of school at UA. Looking back, it wasn't ideal, of course. He had to deal with Kachan's old childhood issues, and the threat of expulsion was a bit excessive. However, he was able to pass the quirk assessment test and avoided getting a nosebleed. And no one was expelled. In fact, Izuku made buddies. Uraraka was incredibly sweet, vivacious, and adorable all at once. It was good to have someone other than his mother present to encourage him. Although Iida and Izuku had a rough start, Iida has proven that he is willing to own up to his mistakes and work to better. Iida may be too serious and stiff for his own good, but what good are friends if they aren't flawless? Compared to the first day of school, the second day seemed somewhat strange, primarily due to the fact that it was a regular school day. UA was a lot like the anime Izuku watched in high school. For the time being, of course, there was less everyday turmoil. In addition, every instructor was a true pro-hero. It was strange to watch these legendary figures instruct in subjects like English or math. However, several of these instructors were far too engrossed in their characters to be instructing a class. Even though Izuku liked present Mike, he was far too animated for an English class in the morning. On paper, Modern art history didn't seem like a bad lesson, but Midnight, the R-rated heroine, was teaching it. Izuku had to fabricate his age on websites in order to view the majority of the footage he had seen of her. Oh no, normally being attractive wasn't the issue. Most of the pupils, especially the lads, felt a little uneasy because she used innuendos all the time in class. Nevertheless, classes continued, and Class 1A finally moved to lunch. Since Lunch Rush prepared and served the food, the novelty of heroes working as staff members persisted. Izuku also had lunch with pals for the first time in a long time. Izuku, Uraraka, and Iida sat down and talked about how they felt about the teachers, the classes, and how much homework they had been assigned. But there was a topic that all three of them were looking forward to. One that would start immediately following lunch. The pupils in 1A arrived at their homeroom, sat, and awaited their next instructor. As they discussed who would teach their next course, the majority of the students were chatting among themselves. Aizawa commanded, "Settle down," through his sleeping sack. He said, "Your teacher will be here shortly," assuming he's on time. A voice boomed into the classroom a few seconds later. "I am here." The students turned to face the door. With a powerful thump, the door slammed open. All Might leaned into the classroom and exclaimed, walking through the door like a normal person. 1A erupted with cheers. When All Might, the number one hero, showed up to instruct, everyone was taken aback. Almost everyone, actually. Izuku was engrossed in the thrill of it all, even though he already knew. He was beaming from ear to ear as he saw his mentor. All Might was dressed in his Silver Age outfit, which was primarily silver, blue, and red. Prior to the Bronze Age costume, it was the last to wear a cape. Aizawa said, "Settle down," from his chair. As a result, the class turned down the volume a little. All Might pondered, seems I need no introduction. Greetings, kids. Welcome to the Foundational Hero Studies, aka Heroics 101. Today, we'll be commencing. All Might reached into his suit and took out a card with the words, "Battle Trial," printed on it. The trial of battle. The class exploded in applause once more, and some of the more combative pupils joined in. Love the enthusiasm. Before we begin, one must remember that a hero's success is not just in their quirk or skills, but in how they appear. After that, All Might pulls 20 suitcases and spreads them out flat on the table. Before you enrolled into this academy, you all submitted designs for your costumes. With your designs and the combined effort of costume corporations and UA's own support department, your next step to becoming a pro hero is right at your fingertips. Each of your costumes are assigned based on your seating position. Grab them, get change, and meet me in ground beta, All Might said. All Might concluded, and remember our school motto, go beyond, plus ultra. Plus ultra, was the response from the class. Izuku was a little more than nervous about acquiring his suit while the other students hurried to get theirs. Throughout all the training, he hardly recalled turning in his costume. Izuku picked up his number 18 and gulped. He secretly hoped his outfit wouldn't make him look foolish as he followed the other students to the changing rooms. It was awful, my god. It was even worse. Izuku recalled the recollections of designing this as he gazed at the costume in front of him. Izuku's clothing style before gaining his powers was largely influenced by All Might. The goal of the costume was to resemble classic comic book and manga characters while including All Might emblems and personal touches. On paper, it looked fantastic. Well, not so much in reality. The spandex-like substance didn't feel heavy enough to offer any protection. He stood out like a sore thumb because of his turquoise coloring. His mouth guard was designed to mimic All Might's constant smile, but it ended up appearing like a crazy cartoon character. The twin spikes on his hood, which were meant to resemble All Might's recognizable tufts of hair, instead looked like spiky rabbit ears. He felt even more like a cartoon thanks to the gloves, even though the knee padding and elbow guards were a good addition. A pouch with tissues in case Izuku ever had to cope with a nosebleed was an addition to the belt that was not part of the original design. But the cherry on top of this embarrassing cake was a little letter from his mother, who disclosed that she had prepared it herself in her spare time. Izuku dreaded the idea of one of his classmates learning about the letter, even though he loved his mother and would never say otherwise. Fortunately, Izuku's outfit didn't seem to bother any of the other lads as he changed. The majority were appreciating their own or another person's. Izuku did believe most of them looked better than his, to be fair. Some chose a more functional costume design, such as Kaminari the electric person. Some wore more ornate and armored attire, such as the Frenchman with the belly button laser, Aoyama. Kirishima, one of the guys, appeared to have modeled his outfit after Crimson Riot, an older hero. However, his was superior to Izuku's. Did Mineta have on a diaper? Kachan would naturally style himself following a real explosion. Additionally, he wore 2 gauntlets shaped like grenades on his arms. Todoroki was dressed simply in slacks and a white dress shirt, but his right side was completely covered in ice, save for his face. The males gathered in ground beta with their female peers after everyone had done dressing. Additionally, the females had a variety of costume options, ranging from simple to intricate. Izuku noted that some of the girls' costumes were more revealing than others as he made mental notes about them. After that, he arrived at Hagakure, who was wearing only boots and gloves. According to Izuku's memory, her quirk was permanent invisibility, which is independent of clothing, therefore that would imply. Before his hormones took effect, Izuku transformed. He didn't want to consider the possibility that one of his classmates was currently nude. Hey, Deku. That's a nice costume. Izuku turned to look at Uraraka, who appeared to be dressed like an astronaut in a pink and black suit. Oh, thanks, stumbled Izuku. You look good too. Uraraka tugged at various sections of her clothing and said, yeah, I guess. Just wish I could have been more specific about some things. Some parts of this are really skin tight. Izuku trailed behind her as she pulled. The black spandex tightened around Uraraka's body, so her protests were not without merit. Very close, tight but uncomfortable. Izuku looked away before it worsened, grateful that the mask concealed his blush. Why you know, the support department can, refit it, I think, Izuku said, attempting to maintain eye contact with Uraraka. When Uraraka said, yeah, I guess you're right, thanks. No problem. I see you two have already started comparing costumes. They both looked at Iida. Izuku described his armor as a combination of an engine block and knight's armor. It covered Iida from head to toe, just like Izuku's costume. Uraraka said, how's your costume, Iida? I think mine needs to be refitted a bit. Iida said, I am sorry to hear that, she said. However, I can safely say that my costume fits perfectly. I must thank the support department for their excellent work. How about yours, Midoriya? Oh, it's all right, I guess. Everyone else's are cooler anyway. Uraraka said, hey, don't say that. I think it looks sort of cool, like in a do-it-yourself kind of way. Are those supposed to be rabbit ears? Izuku forced himself not to grip the ears out of embarrassment. No, Izuku acknowledged. Honestly, they were supposed to resemble All Might's hair. For a moment, Izuku saw the man himself turn to face him. Izuku could see that All Might was cringing on the inside, even though he had an endless smile on his face. God. Izuku could feel the shame from this far. At this moment, All Might was most likely silently passing judgment. Oh, it couldn't be any worse today. All Might said, looking spiffy, to the class. All Might gave a thumbs up. They say clothes make the man and you all prove it, very cool. Iida held up his hand and said, All Might, sir, will this be similar to the entrance exam? Excellent question, young Iida. However, instead of fighting robots outside, this lesson will put you against other humans indoors. One student said, sir, isn't that a bit ahead of the syllabus? All Might said, that just means we're getting straight to the point. While most covered villain fights happen outdoors, statistically, most villains make their move in the dark. Home invasions, warehouse deals, and other such things are much more common. For this exercise, each of you will be split into teams of 2 and those teams will be categorized as either heroes or villains. Iida inquired, and how will we be paired? By random chance. A wheel used for vintage bingo games was unveiled by All Might. Inside were balls of various colors, each labeled with a different letter. Sir, not to be rude, but wouldn't it be more effective for us to team up based on our abilities? Iida responded. This is actually a more realistic approach, Izuku said. A lot of hero team-ups are random and the usual way they meet up is because 2 heroes are in the same neighborhood. Correct, young Midoriya. Now then before we start, any other questions? The mighty said. Yaoyorozu inquired, how will we be graded on this? With a dangerous tone, Kachan questioned, how much can we hurt the other team? Uraraka fretfully questioned, will we get expelled if we fail this? Does this cape make me Lou Magnifique? Aoyama asked, spinning while glittering. All Might yelled, I can't answer you if you all speak at once. He took out a deck of note cards and started reading. Here's the situation. A group of villains are currently holding a nuclear bomb inside one of the buildings set to detonate in 10 minutes. It's the hero's job to find and disarm it. Both teams get 5 minutes of prep time to plan and strategize. The heroes win if they capture the villains or touch the bomb. The villains win if they capture the heroes or wait out the time limit. You won't be expelled if you succeed or fail. We will stop if things get too violent, and that cape sparkles brilliantly. With that all out of the way, step up and draw your lot. All Might pointed to the machine. Students randomly grabbed a ball one by one. A ball bearing the letter A was given to Izuku. As it happens, he and Uraraka were on the same team. Good. When All Might said, "For our first matchup," he spun the wheel and produced 2 balls. It'll be Team A as the heroes and Team D as the villains. Well, Izuku thought, he and Uraraka will be up first. He sought out the opposing squad. They faced up against Kacchan and Iida. It got worse, man. Izuku perspired beneath his clothes. Fighting Kacchan was at the top of his list of things he didn't want to do. All Might waved to the remaining pupils, saying, "Heroes and villains make their way to their positions in the field. Everyone else, follow me to the observation deck." Later, Uraraka and Izuku were standing outside one of the structures. It was as uninteresting as it could be and around 5 stories high. However, as it was intended to resemble a typical villain hideout, it was inevitable that they would be hidden in plain sight. Each participant received 3 items: tiny earbuds to communicate with their companion, and a roll of capture tape intended to subdue a hero or villain. The final one was a floor plan map of the entire structure. Izuku was checking that his capture tape was still attached to his belt, while Uraraka was tinkering with hers. He was trying to read the plans while crouching. Uraraka said, "So, what should our plan be?" "Well," began Izuku. "Kacchan will most likely go after me first." "Yeah, he really seems to have it out for you." Izuku gave a shrug. "Can't be helped. That means Kacchan will leave Iida to defend the bomb." Izuku gave his chin a rub. "All right, here's the plan. I'll distract Kacchan and you go get the bomb from Iida." Uraraka said, "Okay, and anything a bit more specific?" "Well, I mean, Iida would primarily use his legs for combat, so you should incapacitate those first. If not, use the capture tape to wrap around him." "And what will you do about Bakugo? He's made for longer battles. My best bet is to try and subdue him early. Honestly, both of our quirks rely on other things being present to fully work." Izuku murmured. "Hopefully, there will be enough stuff lying around to work with." Uraraka grinned and said, "Well, good luck to us, right?" Izuku gave a nod. "Hey, do you think we can try and get some reconnaissance before?" Over the loudspeakers, All Might yelled, "Prep time is over, heroes. Get in there and go for it." "Oh, never mind then." Izuku and Uraraka hurried inside after that. The design of the first floor was largely barren. Only a few chairs, tables, and cartons were scattered about. Corridors leading to the top levels ran farther down. "Come on. This way," Izuku said, gesturing toward the landing area. In pursuit of the bomb, he and Uraraka sprinted for them. "I don't see it," exclaimed Uraraka. "Me neither," said Izuku. "Go up." They went up the stairs and into another set of hallways and rooms. They kept running and inspected each chamber before moving into what appeared to be another big hall. Izuku was growing anxious. When would Kacchan attack? He knew. Izuku experienced a crippling feeling of fear as the two began walking to the next flight of steps. "Deku." Izuku pushed Uraraka away and said, "Look out," as a blast sounded close to his left cheek. When the two stood up again, Bakugo was in a combat stance. Izuku said, "Uraraka, go on ahead." With a nod, Uraraka sprinted toward the stairs. Izuku thought Kacchan may assault her, but instead he let her go so he could concentrate on Izuku. "Okay. Now it's just him and me," Izuku said to himself. He quickly realized that he was alone himself with his childhood bully. Izuku nervously added, "Great, now it's just him and me." "Die. Take this." Kacchan swung a right punch with full force. But Izuku endured that same attack for years. Izuku turned to some simple martial arts because Kacchan was getting too near for a telekinetic attack. Izuku caught Bakugo's arm and wrist as he threw the blow, then used Bakugo's momentum to knock him to the ground. Bakugo rolled back up again, though, so this did not knock him out. Izuku attempted to seem assured when he said, "This isn't going to be the same as before. I know how you fight, you don't scare me." As Kacchan said, "You're going to wish you were scared when I'm done with you." Izuku retreated to maintain space as Bakugo charged in once more. Izuku would use his quirk to seize a nearby table or chair and hurl it toward Kacchan, but the blonde would blow it up before it could reach him. It would be a long game of cat and mouse with explosives. Kacchan bellowed, "You haven't changed, Deku." Always trying to be the hero in the weakest way possible. Trying to put up a fight even when you know you can't. I know your secret, you damn nerd. You've been lying all this time because you're looking down on me. An explosion roared to Izuku's right, and he threw up his barrier. The words of Kacchan were beginning to sink in. Izuku exclaimed, looking down on you. Incredulously. I looked up to you. Everyone did. You were cool, confident, and your quirk is amazing. Why would I ever think I was better than you? Because of this, Kacchan said, pointing to their current predicament. You've acted like you were weak all your life, and suddenly, you got yourself this lame quirk. Now you think you can stand up to me. I'm not like any of these extras. I know who you were before this. And I don't care how long you've been hiding this from me, because I already know I'm stronger than you. I just need to beat into so hard into your goddamn head you'll never forget it. Bakugo lunged at Izuku's stomach with a knee. He followed it up with a headbutt and an explosion directly into Izuku's chest without even waiting for the green-haired telekinetic to recover. Izuku got well gradually. His heavy chest was making it difficult for him to suck in air. The headbutt's headache also didn't help. Izuku spotted Kacchan charging in for another attack as his vision cleared. Izuku rolled and staggered out of the assaults. Any debris that remained was too small to be of any use, as Izuku could see. They had splintered any chairs or tables. Izuku could have attempted to use his telekinesis to halt Kacchan, but he was unaware of the consequences. Izuku then recalls his barrier. He could use his telekinesis to protect himself by coating himself. What if he used it offensively rather than defensively? Increase his strength rather than his stamina. Izuku called forth his barrier and awaited Kacchan's assault. The blonde bomber was taking another right hook, so he didn't have to wait long. For both of them, time seemed to slow down as Izuku hid beneath Kacchan's arm. Izuku drew his arms back, then used his right arm to support his left, delivering an elbow punch to Kacchan. Izuku then delivered a straight right into Kacchan's stomach, sending the boy sliding backwards as he was surprised by this. Izuku didn't have to be concerned about using too much force. Bakugo's quirk provided him with the toughness he needed to withstand his explosion's recoil. Izuku was therefore less relieved when Kacchan stood up. A small amount of drool escaped his lips and was wiped away by the blonde. He did not respond with his usual fierce passion when he looked at it. Like a spark speeding toward explosive, this was longer. With dangerous composure, Kacchan stated, I finally figured it out. You're not just looking down on me. He screamed, clenching his fist. You're holding yourself back. This claim surprised Izuku, who allowed Bakugo to present his case. I should have seen it earlier. How you almost got first place in the entrance exam despite your trashy villain score. How you almost got into the top 10s in that stupid quirk test but didn't. You're not just looking down on me. You think you're better than everyone else. It was unreal, crazy. Izuku would never consider himself to be better than anyone else. He was barely making ends meet in those instances. He worked just as hard as everybody else. However, in retrospect, did he? He could have scored more points on the admission exam if he had used his flight to its fullest. He stopped before determining how far he could have crushed the machine when he attempted the grip strength challenge. Did he fear his own strength? Fearful of it? Izuku realized that he wasn't holding back because he was afraid of his abilities or felt superior. No, Izuku understood his need to blend in. To be typical. Aldrea Middle was not going to be like Ua. The odd guy out, the quirkless loser without friends, was not who he was going to be. This time would be different. Kacchan went on, I trained my whole life to get here, and I'm not going to let some crybaby weakling who thinks suddenly having a quirk means he's better than me ruin it. I don't care how glasses and round cheeks battle it out, but believe me, by the time we're through, only one of us is going to be standing, and it sure won't be some spineless loser who won't fight at full strength. Izuku received yet another slap in the face. Izuku knew he couldn't allow his former bully to win this time. To get here, he trained just as hard, and even if Kacchan. You were right, said Izuku. About me holding back, but you're wrong about the reasoning. I think, even if I tell you the truth, you won't believe my words. So, I promise you this, I'll defeat you with my all. You want me to go at full power, Kacchan? Is that what you want? Kacchan gave a menacing smile. He made a, come get me, motion with his fingers, saying, it will make it all the more satisfying to put you back on the ground where you belong. Izuku lunged forward. Izuku grabbed Kacchan and smashed him against a wall instead of punching him. Some of his fists connected with the wall behind Kacchan, while others cracked it. Izuku would then be knocked into another corridor wall by Bakugo. He swung in a left hook that struck after grabbing Izuku's cowl and tearing it off. In the hallway, The two would fight. There was no longer any indication that this battle was a spectacle. No technique was used. There was a lot of grappling, hitting, kicking, and punching. It was a battle in the most realistic, filthy, and vicious manner imaginable. Izuku heard fragments of Uraraka's messages throughout this time. As it happens, Iida was really watching over the device when she discovered it. Izuku recalled that, much to Uraraka's chagrin, Iida took the part of a hammy villain quite seriously. Izuku, however, didn't care at the time. The entire plot centered on him defeating Kacchan, demonstrating that he was not who the explosion user claimed to be. Izuku gave Kacchan one last shove, pushing him farther down the hallway. Panting from exhaustion, the two boys stood. Both had scrapes and bruises, while Izuku had burn marks. Izuku struggled to keep his weary arms raised in case Kacchan attempted another rush. But he didn't. Kacchan was laughing in his head. Heh, heh, smiled Kacchan. You know, for someone so smart, you can be so stupid. Izuku's eyes narrowed in perplexity. Kacchan went on, I know you've been taking notes of me. Ever since I got my quirk, you've been following me like a damn stalker and writing everything down in those notebooks of yours. You already know how my quirk works. Izuku softly concurred, although he was still unsure of Kacchan's ultimate strategy. Here's a refresher course. My sweat contains nitroglycerin in it. I can make it explode. The more I sweat, the more powerful my explosions are. Kacchan pointed to the grenade-shaped gauntlets on his forearms and said, See these things? They store up sweat when I fight. Now, think of all that sweat, that nitroglycerin, and think of what happens if I release it. Izuku realized it just as Kacchan grinned. That's right, one big boom. I'm going to have to thank the nerds in the support department if this works. Raising his right arm, Kacchan aimed it directly toward Izuku. His left hand was perilously near the gauntlet's pin. No, young Bakugo. Don't use it, All Might's voice sounded over the speakers. You'll kill him at this range. Bakugo yelled back, he'll live if he dodges. Izuku stopped. Every sensible idea begged him to get out of the way. It was only logical. He could not possibly survive if he faced the blast directly. But a growing voice warned him against it. His barrier could withstand the blast, so it wanted him to. Furthermore, it would demonstrate Kacchan's strength. He wasn't keeping anything back. Bakugo squeezed the trigger, saying, Take this, die. As the blast swept over him, Izuku activated his barrier and crossed his arms for safety. It was really hot. He felt the heat flowing over him even with his shield up. His ears began to ring, and he was certain that the vibrations caused the structure to tremble. As the flames died down and only smoke remained, what seemed like minutes passed in a matter of seconds. Bakugo dropped his arms limp. He inhaled deeply, being cautious not to inhale his own smoke. After such a large blow, his right arm tingled. What a blast that was, damn it. You can be sure Bakugo was pleased of the fact that it was the largest Bakugo he had ever created. When Bakugo noticed that Deku was still standing once the smoke cleared, his pride gave way to rage. The nerd seems totally unfazed. His hero outfit trailed only faint puffs of smoke. Deku also dropped his arms. He could already feel the blood dripping from his nose. Bakugo scoffed, then realized he had one more massive blast to go. He smiled. Good thing there's two of these. Raising his left arm, he attempted to use his right arm to pull the pin. His arms froze before he could get to the pin. Despite his best efforts, Bakugo was unable to move his arms. Nothing Bakugo could do would free them from the invisible bands that bound them. He looked at Deku, who was holding his right arm up with his hand outstretched like a claw. Bakugo saw that Deku was paralyzing Katsuki's arms with his quirk. Izuku abruptly withdrew his left arm before Bakugo could respond verbally. Izuku pushed the arm forward, palm open. It was a terrible push. After being launched through multiple walls, Bakugo vanished from view. Everyone in the observation deck probably heard the near-sonic boom that shook the entire building. Izuku remained standing with his left arm out. Izuku's nose was now freely streaming blood. Before he jolted back up, he stood there for a few seconds. Izuku's attitude appeared to change abruptly. Izuku appeared to have just realized his location and his purpose. Izuku dashed through the wall's holes right away. While searching for Kacchan, he fumbled for a tissue. As Izuku watched the aftermath of his attack, his fear grew. Kacchan was forced through more than 5 walls as a result. Izuku eventually discovered Kacchan leaning against a wall. Fortunately, Kacchan was unable to breach the wall that led to the outdoors. Izuku hurried to see how Kacchan was doing. Izuku could barely tell if he was breathing at all because he was not moving. Izuku's mind was constantly searching for a way to assist him. Izuku didn't want to think about that option, therefore he couldn't have. He attempted to recall the innumerable hero interviews he had witnessed. Something concerning how to find out if someone was still alive had to exist. Izuku placed Kachan's head against his chest. The respiration was still there, but he could hardly hear it. Izuku let out a breath of relief, but he knew that he had to continue. He recalled that one could determine a person's pulse by looking at their wrist. Izuku had to locate another location because Kachan's gauntlets made it difficult for him to get there. The neck. Izuku touched Kachan's neck in an attempt to feel for a pulse. At last, he located it. It continued to beat. Kachan was still alive. In relief, Izuku collapsed onto his butt. However, he couldn't simply abandon Kachan there. He needed medical care. Izuku had to figure out how to get Kachan out of the building. Izuku recalled that they could out a student using the capture tape. Izuku simply wrapped the tape around Kachan's hands like shackles after grabbing it. Over the loudspeakers, All Might's voice echoed, "Katsuki Bakugo has been captured. Don't worry, young Midoriya, medic bots will arrive to take him to the infirmary." Izuku gave a nod. Until the medic bots arrived, he remained with Kachan. Although it didn't take long, Izuku had enough time to cover his nose with tissues. Kachan was taken away by the robots, and Izuku went upstairs. He radioed in for a while. Izuku said, "Uraraka," with his nose plugged. "Where are you?" Uraraka called in, "Deku, I'm fighting Iida on the 5th floor. What the heck were you and Bakugo doing down there? Felt like there were 2 earthquakes back to back." "Sorry," muttered Izuku. "I'll try to be up there as soon as possible. Not to rush you or anything, but Iida's, whoa." The call abruptly terminated. There was no news, but Izuku assumed she had been removed. He accelerated his pace up the steps. Before reaching the top, he tossed aside the 2 bloody tissues. Iida was preparing to pursue Uraraka as she made a frantic run for the bomb. Izuku chose to create the distraction for himself. "Hey, Iida." Izuku's quick appearance caused Iida to spin around. "What's this?" exclaimed Iida. Uraraka was correct. He took this very seriously. "You may have bested my compatriot, but nothing will stop you heroes from disarming my bomb. Heroes have captured the bomb. The hero team wins." Uraraka was hanging onto the fictitious bomb as if it were her life, and both boys turned to face her. Iida exclaimed, "Curses," foiled by the champions of justice, and then went back to being the same old professional. "Well done, Uraraka and Midoriya, you have won." After some while, Izuku said, Thank Iida?" Still clutching the bomb, Uraraka opened her eyes. She questioned, Did we win?" All 4 eventually returned to the observation room following a strange trip to the infirmary to ensure that Izuku's nose wouldn't be bleeding anytime soon. Although Kachan was already up, he had no plans to engage in any physical activities today. As All Might spoke to them, they all sat down. All Might said, as if it were a general piece of advice, "You all did well on the exercise today. However, I should remind everyone that destruction of a building one is in is not only foolish for heroes, but also villains." Izuku knew the symbol of peace was addressing both Kachan and Izuku. "At the end of every round, I will appoint the MVP of the match, and for our first match, I would like to award the title to young Iida." Though somewhat taken aback by his moniker, the armored hero in training accepted it. "Now," All Might said, turning to face the other students, "would anyone like to explain why I chose young Iida?" A hand sprang up. Pointing to her, All Might said, "Yes, young Yaoyorozu." The girl with the ponytail got up and explained why. Iida was awarded the title of MVP because he was the only one who fully committed to the scenario. Bakugo ran off to deal with his personal feud with Midoriya and recklessly caused damage to the structure of the building. Bakugo snarled but took no action. Midoriya, likewise, also engaged with his feud with Bakugo. His defense against Bakugo's explosion was, while impressive, also incredibly risky. While checking to make sure a villain was not fatally injured was a good idea, Midoriya wasted too much time waiting for the paramedics before helping his comrade. Yaoyorozu's comments caused Izuku to shrink. Even though he knew she was correct, hearing them still made him feel horrible. Uraraka, while her plan of action ultimately won out in the end, she also didn't take Iida's performance seriously, which could have led her to underestimate Iida's villain persona and cause more damage. Uraraka looked at Yaoyorozu pleadingly, asking how she could have believed Iida's act. Iida was the only one who understood his role and performed it to the best of his abilities, and that is why he won MVP. said Yaoyorozu. All of Might's perspiration fell. He obviously didn't anticipate her going into such detail. Well, that was exactly what I was thinking, young Yaoyorozu, thank you. As All Might rolled for the next two teams, she sat down. Some of his students complimented Izuku as the matches progressed. His ability to withstand Bakugo's explosion was described as manly by Kirishima, a fissured redhead. Even though the praise was well received, Izuku kept thinking about Kacchan. Since being released from the infirmary, he had remained silent. Izuku was concerned because he believed the youngster had changed as a result of their altercation. When called on, Kacchan would produce a sound other than a growl or an answer, even during the remainder of the contests. Izuku, what did you do to him? Bakugo's back straightened. He tried not to slump, but he could hear his bone pop. Deku knocked him down, but the old hag at the infirmary helped him get better. He vowed in silence to never be sent back there. Even while the hag's quirk aided in his recuperation, it was still disgusting. He was sitting there now, watching the other extras finish the workout. None of them could matter to him. Most of them, however. By himself, this icy jerk with half red, half white hair won and froze the entire structure. He would cause difficulties. No, Bakugo was only thinking about Deku. Weak, quirkless Deku who took Bakugo's strongest blow and put him out. It was illogical. According to Katsuki Bakugo, the universe operated in a certain way. The powerful paved their own path while ensuring that the weak avoided death. And Bakugo was the strongest child for a very long period. In middle school, it made logical. Deku had no quirk, while Bakugo had the strongest. It was different now. Deku now possesses a powerful quirk. His blows had a greater effect than they ought to have. And Bakugo was knocked out cold by that push. How did Deku, who is useless, get a powerful quirk? A villain? No, that isn't feasible. People cannot be given quirks. Was Deku a latecomer to the game? That about puberty, his quirk appeared. Bakugo also rejected such theory. This was no simple manga where characters acquired abilities by chance. This was actual life. Bakugo burned in his chair. After middle school, Deku apparently developed a backbone if he was prepared to confront Bakugo. There was no doubt about that. It seemed as though he was battling two sides of Deku during the entire battle. The helpless whiner and the fighter. However, something inside Deku altered once Bakugo fired his gauntlet blast. He had to give it a name. Bakugo was not a particularly poetic person, but he didn't waste time studying poetry for a grade that would ultimately be worthless. In order to explain how Deku changed on the inside, he attempted to employ the metaphor that eyes are the window to the soul. Deku's eyes resembled streams filled with stones. Most of the time, it resembled rushing water across a rock's smooth surface. Deku's eyes remained moist even after he manned up and engaged Bakugo in combat. It was only much clearer on the solid rock. Deku's eyes changed when he repelled Bakugo's assault. Deku's eyes were more intense, more focused, but not really present. A coating of crystals on darker rocks. He seemed to be taken over by something else. The nerd was driven to not hold back by some sort of instinct. It was crazy. It sounds absurd that someone might be taken over by a quirk, but who could judge? Birdhead's quirk was a sentient shadow monster. Nevertheless, it appeared to be the most correct. When Deku overcame Bakugo, something else was in control. Until he knocked Bakugo out, he even heard several extras chatting about how Deku appeared to be out of it. The working hypothesis was that Deku acquired a quirk in some way. A self-admittedly strong quirk that appears to be more complex than it first appears. Inside Deku, there's something else. Sometimes, when Bakugo was paralyzed and forced through certain walls, something called the shots. Bakugo gave Deku a scowl. Bakugo was now in danger from the worthless nerd. Still, Deku kept acting like Deku, taking notes and mumbling. The Deku who battled Bakugo in that building wasn't this one. The Deku who gave Bakugo his all and prevailed wasn't this one. How did this occur? Bakugo wondered, what the hell happened to you, Deku? On a clear day, Ua stood tall and proud. To get to class, students had to walk from the trains onto the main grounds. But today was different from the normal days when people stopped by the school to look at the structure that taught the next generation of heroes. The university entrance was packed with reporters and journalists. Any student who was unlucky enough to come into their line of sight was tormented by them. However, after yesterday's announcement, it was understandable why the media vultures harassed everybody associated with the institution. The symbol of peace, All Might, made it known that he was a member of the teaching staff at UA. A man, meanwhile, was hiding in an alleyway's shadows. He saw the news scavengers attempt to gnaw on a little boy with green hair. How the gigantic #1 hero could be as brilliant at educating children as he was at saving them was the question they kept asking the lad. As he attempted to navigate the maze of reporters, the child stumbled to sidestep the question. The man detested everything. He detested reporters who covered everything there was to know about heroes. How they jumped to the conclusion that everything could be divided into heroes and villains. He detested the young man who was risking his life to defend a corrupt system. He detested the idea of heroes themselves, who prioritized their own fame and reputation over aiding society's actual victims. The man's only goal was to reduce the entire institution to dust. However, the man was wiser. He would be reprimanded by his master for such stupidity. It wouldn't go well for him to attack a school full of heroes by himself, especially with the top hero there. The man waited. As he moved deeper onto the university, he saw the green-haired boy squeak out of the sea of reporters. In the gloom, the man remained motionless. When he received a signal from someone within the school, he would take action. He gave the media a smile. While he got what he came for, they would be a good diversion. The man excitedly scratched at his neck. It was about what will happen after, not about this job. A grin stretched over his parched, brittle lips. He was eager for the heroes to see what his master had prepared. Once inside, Izuku exhaled a sigh of relief. On hero videos, he witnessed terrifying tales of reporter mobs, but being in one was an entirely different experience. Izuku never imagined that he would have to deal with the press so quickly. When they asked him quickly whether All Might was a good teacher or not, he hardly responded. How could he have known? He only had one class. Izuku couldn't tell anyone about All Might training him about a year ago, but it wasn't totally accurate. Nevertheless, Izuku felt bad for any other children they could have encountered. Fortunately, as Izuku was heading to the front door, Aizawa entered and reprimanded them. Izuku hoped they would rethink their strategies for obtaining a scoop, but the crowd remained. He ought to have been more aware. Izuku waited for homeroom to begin while seated at his desk. Aizawa sat at his desk and spoke to the class as the bell rang. Aizawa kept the students on edge by saying, "Today, you all will decide a crucial part that will affect the rest of your time here. You must choose a class representative." The class as a whole sided something so unremarkable, but it sparked a flurry of nominations. Ashido, the pink girl, Kaminari, and even Mineta. Those who did not vote for Kachan were, of course, threatened with death. Izuku remained silent during this entire ordeal. To be honest, he had no desire to hold any kind of leadership role. His goal was to breeze through this without any issues. "Everyone," Iida said, getting to his feet. "The only way to solve this by a democratic election. Wouldn't everyone just vote for themselves?" Asui, a girl who looked like a frog, said, "It's not like we know each other that well yet." "Precisely. That way, the person with the most votes will have already won the respect and admiration of their classmates," Iida responded. Then he looked at Aizawa. Iida said, "Aizawa, sir, will this be allowed?" Aizawa, already almost cocooned in his sleeping sack, gulped from his juice pouch. Zippered up his sleeping bag, Aizawa slept. "I don't care, just finish before homeroom ends." Iida distributed note cards so that each person could record their vote. Izuku was aware that he would not cast his own ballot. He considered his response, then jotted it down. The final verdict was calculated once all of the cards had been gathered. Yaoyorozu received 4 votes, while Izuku, somewhat unexpectedly, received 3. After his election power sleep, Aizawa's words were, "Yaoyorozu, congratulations, your class representative. Midoriya, since you had the second highest amount of votes, your vice representative." Like someone who was destined to be a leader, Yaoyorozu stood with dignity and grace. Izuku was perspiring frantically to avoid appearing foolish. Izuku was taken aback by this development. 3 distinct people voting for him surprised him. He looked around the room to see who would support him. Perhaps Uraraka. That was a significant maybe. He didn't become president, at least. If he did, Izuku doubted he would survive. Following her brief inaugural address, Yaoyorozu bowed and said, "I thank everyone for their trust and pledge to be the best representative in all my ability. A and I promise to help," Izuku answered with a shaky, "A." Izuku wouldn't make it now, indeed. He had to let someone else take the job. However, what would he do? When lunchtime came, Izuku, Uraraka, and Iida sat at the same table as one another. Uraraka complimented the telekinetic, saying, "Congrats on getting VP, Deku." Iida stated less enthusiastically, yes, it seems the people have made their decision, and they wanted you. Izuku justified himself by saying, hey, I didn't think I'd get any votes, honestly, I can't believe Iida didn't win. I mean, not that you look like a shoe-in for class rep, but... Was my one vote from you, Midoriya? Yeah, I thought you would be really good at it. Iida gave a nod. And while I didn't get the result I expected, I am willing to be the bigger man and admit you were a solid choice for representative. I did put my vote for you, Midoriya. Ah, it's been barely a week, and you two trust each other so much you'd vote for each other, Uraraka responded. When Uraraka pointed out how quickly Izuku and Iida had become friends, Izuku covered his face to hide his humiliation. Izuku said, speaking of which, to shift the subject. Iida, what did you mean by expected result? Did you expect to win? Uraraka continued, yeah. Come on, Iida, we want to know. Uraraka's unexpected interest and Izuku's question appeared to catch Iida off guard. Before leaning in, he checked to see whether anyone was listening. Okay, so do you two know of the pro-hero, Ingenium? Iida responded. The faces of Uraraka and Izuku brightened with recognition. The turbo hero? Replied Midoriya. Uraraka went on, I heard his agency has hundreds of sidekicks. Well, said Iida. He's my older brother. The two gasped in astonishment at this. In fact, my whole family has a long history of being pro-heroes, Iida said. Uraraka exclaimed, why didn't you tell us? That's so cool. To be frank, said Iida, I didn't want my family's reputation to impact how everyone saw me. I wanted to be a hero on my own merits, without my family's legacy. Izuku considered it, legacy. Izuku was his family's first pro-hero, as far as he was aware. His father only spoke to him via paychecks and the occasional letter, and his mother never mentioned any family members involved in the hero company. Unlike Iida, Izuku was never forced to live up to a family's expectations. But his mind kept returning to the seashore, when Izuku rejected the power of All Might. What would happen if he agreed to One for All? Would Izuku be able to manage that legacy? In addition to All Might's request, he most likely would have kept it a secret because Izuku would have preferred for his peers to see him for himself rather than All Might's heir. Izuku said, I think I get it, before realizing that his friends were taking notice. I mean, I sort of get why Iida didn't tell us his family history, Izuku said, and how he wanted everyone to see for who he is and not his family. Iida bowed, nodding. Yes, and I apologize for keeping this secret from my two friends. Uraraka reassured him, you don't have to apologize, it's not that big of a deal to us. Iida grinned and sat up straight. There came a loud booming sound that broke the moment. Inside the cafeteria, it continued to echo. Izuku tried to muffle the alarm by putting his palms to his ears. To discover out what was happening, the kids frantically searched their surroundings. An automatic voice sounded over the loudspeaker, wearing, level 3 security breach detected, wearing, it said. One youngster exclaimed, what's a level 3 security breach? An older kid responded, it means someone broke through the gate. We're under attack. That was when terror struck. Pupils were scrambling to locate any way out. In the chaos, children were shoved down and tables were overturned. The resulting panic forced Izuku, Uraraka, and Iida to a wall. Uraraka was able to pull herself up by grabbing onto a windowsill. She let out a gasp. Guys, look, she exclaimed. Izuku was assisted by Iida, who went up to the window. Supervillains weren't encircling the entrance outside. Rather, the door was being pounded by a throng of reporters. Uraraka clarified, it's just the media. How are we going to tell that to everyone else? Izuku demanded. Before Iida's eyes gleamed with a plan, the three attempted to devise their own plans. There, Iida said, gesturing with Izuku's head, followed by Uraraka's. The emergency exit sign. If one of us can get up there, we can alert the rest of the student body. How strong are your voices? When Uraraka said, I think you're the loudest one out of us, you're our best bet. Iida turned to Izuku and nodded. Midoriya, can you move me with your quirk? I can try. Izuku directed Iida with his quirk. Iida, however, was unable to focus due to the incessant noise and warnings, and he hardly moved. I can't, Izuku said in desperation. There's too much noise for me to concentrate. Iida looked across at Uraraka. She nodded, understanding Iida's strategy already. She connected all 5 fingers to give him a slap. Iida started to float off the ground after that. After that, he climbed the wall and then leapt off. Uraraka watched him steadily as he glided through the room. Uraraka pushed her fingers together as he passed over the sign, allowing Iida to fall on top of it. Iida looked out into the crowd. "Everybody, calm down. We are not under attack. It is just the media," Iida screamed. The majority of the audience began to disperse and observe Iida's twitchy, stilted movements. "This is not a villain attack. It's just reporters who have gotten through the gate," Iida went on. "Everybody form orderly lines and follow procedures. We are members of one of the most prestigious schools, and we should act like it." With time, the crowd became more subdued and dispersed. After some time, Izuku, Uraraka, and Iida returned to their homeroom. As it happened, Iida's actions during the break-in earned him the nickname, Emergency Exit, from the majority of the student body. Iida didn't display any signs of embarrassment. "Well, that was wild," said Uraraka. "At least we learned a limitation of your quirk, Deku." Izuku scratched the back of his head and said, "Yeah, I never thought how much concentration my quirk required and how easily it can be broken. I mean, I've read up on pros with telekinetic quirks and some of them mentioned having trouble with Cognate Raion if there is too much stimuli." "Deku, you're mumbling again. Sorry. Uraraka, you did really well floating Iida without getting nauseous." Uraraka grinned. "Compared to all those robots in the entrance exam, Iida's a lightweight." That made the two giggle a little, and then Aizawa appeared as the door opened. The hero of Eraser walked over to his workstation. "So," Aizawa said, "lunch period was a bit more exciting today than usual." The class watched for any new information. Aizawa went on, "It appears that there was a brief breach in UA's security. We are looking into it and are taking measures to prevent another situation like this. As for the reporters, they will be hit with trespassing charges, as well as strongly worded messages advising them to not be anywhere UA's campus for the rest of their careers." Although the kids were somewhat reassured, the question that most of them had in their throats was not addressed. "Despite today's interesting event, we will not close school early." There were quite a few groans that could be heard across the classroom. "Quit whining," mandated Aizawa. "You're all students of UA and are expected to handle certain situations like this at least once during your time here. As for now, if anyone doesn't have any other questions, prepare for your next period." Izuku raised his hand. Aizawa looked over at him. "Midoriya." Izuku got up, attempting to summon the bravery to speak in front of an audience. Gulping, "Aizawa, sir," Izuku said. "I want to resign as vice representative and give that role to Iida." There were a few gasps, but they were soon put out. Aizawa raised one eyebrow and asked, "And your reasoning is?" Izuku clarified, "Iida took charge during the break-in at lunch. He was the one who came up with the plan. He was the one who calmed everyone down. And he got everyone to follow procedure. I could barely do anything, while Iida took control of the situation. I believe Iida is better qualified as vice representative than I am. But I won't force this on Iida if he doesn't want it." Iida got up and bowed, his face quivering with emotion. Iida responded solemnly, "Midoriya, I would be honored to accept such a responsibility." Then he looked at Aizawa. "If Aizawa-sensei allows it, that is." Aizawa gives a shrug. "Fair enough. Iida, congratulations, you're the new vice representative." The classroom was filled with applause. "Emergency exit," was being chanted in enthusiasm by a few children. Iida waved, a little taken aback by the enthusiastic response. Yaoyorozu remarked, "Iida, I look forward to working with you." Iida said, "As do I, class representative. With that all out of the way, everyone, get ready for your next class." Aizawa concluded. "Iida, Yaoyorozu, you two will have to stay later to learn about your new duties." The remainder of the day proceeded as usual. Nezu gazed at the screens, absorbing every detail with his beady eyes. When the reporters broke in, he was reviewing the security tapes. Nezu was aware that the quirk required to overcome UA's protections was unlikely to be present in any reporter. But he had to make sure. He had to find out who had broken through his defenses. He inspected each camera, searching for any strange activity. The group of reporters was constantly monitored by one camera. Nezu changed cameras until he discovered one that was focused on a man standing next to a wall with a hood over his head. Seeing that this individual was not among the reporters, Nezu watched him closely. The video eventually showed the man moving toward UA's gate wall. He put his hand against it there. As the man withdrew his hand, the wall began to deteriorate in real time. The man moved away from the camera as the hole grew wider and the deterioration slowed to a halt. Nezu accelerated the video to the point when one of the reporters saw the hole, and the others followed. The individual then joined the gathering again and then broke away on his own. Before the visitor vanished from the camera's field of view, Nezu followed his trail. In an attempt to locate their enigmatic guest, Nezu examined every camera. Eventually, he located the man in one of the stairwells. Nezu followed the man's route to a section of the offices of the different teachers using the cameras. Nezu discovered the man in a somewhat run-down office. After glancing inside one of the filing cabinets, the burglar peered inside his jacket. Taking 2 surgical gloves, he placed them on each hand. After that, the man searched the cabinet for whatever he was looking for. At a folder, his quest came to an end. Nezu's eyes couldn't make out the image, but it seemed to have meaning for the man. After searching through the folder, the man took out a sheet of paper. The document was too far away to read again, and Nezu inwardly blamed himself for not being able to obtain a more definitive answer. In one hand, the man used 3 fingers to hold the paper. In the other, he extracted a phone. Eventually, the man launched the camera app and snapped pictures of the paper. Then he put the document back in the folder, pocketed the phone, and shut the cabinet. After removing the glove from his right hand, he reached for his phone and texted someone. Before a vortex formed, the man shook his hands and took off his left glove. The portal closed behind the man as he entered and disappeared. Nezu stepped back from the screens, taking in the scene. A man with a strong quirk snuck inside and took images of UA documents while using the media as a diversion. Nezu concentrated his high-specs quirk-induced heightened mind to examine what he saw. The man's first quirk was his capacity to touch and decompose at least inorganic materials. The new hole in UA's gate was a clear indication of this. Second, the man's quirk probably depends on skin contact or all 5 fingers contacting the object. That was supported by the surgical gloves and the fact that the intruder never touched anything other than the wall with all 5 fingers. Last but not least, the intruder wasn't acting alone. Someone's quirk must have created the portal. Additionally, the individual managed to navigate UA's grounds without coming into contact with majority of the cameras. This made Nezu uneasy. Is there a traitor among UA's members? It was too soon to make a call. Nezu's claws clicked together. He was grimacing despite his smile. UA, or the hero community in general, was the target of someone. This incursion was a prelude to something larger, not the main event. Something structured. Who was the mastermind, though? Nezu found it fascinating that he didn't know. Nezu and an unidentified opponent were now engaged in a strategic game. He may strike first, but would it compel his opponent to attempt something riskier? Something on that document was desired by a villain. Student records? Files for teachers? Academic records? Nezu was still in the dark? That was the buzzword of the day, though. Nezu was still unable to move. He was not yet familiar with his opponent. Anxiety made the principal's tail twitch. Even if it means putting hundreds of students and faculty members in peril, should he do nothing to attract his enigmatic opponent? However, his superiors would prefer that he maintain his dignity. The Hero Commission would like that no vulnerability be displayed at their premier institution. That a villain might easily enter Japan's most esteemed hero school. Nezu's animalistic nature objected to this, even though he recognized that humans must not display fear. It was important to take measures. When a predator is aiming for your throat, you cannot hide behind a strong character. You had to get away and strategize. Nezu already knew the answer, though. They would rebuild their defenses and UA would carry on as usual. The principal was not happy about it, but he knew he had to wait. Still, Nezu shook his head and told himself, I just can't shake the feeling that this isn't going to turn out well. Class 1A waited while seated. They knew Aizawa was here when they heard the door slam. For the following generation of heroes, it was routine as usual. Normally, you would be waiting for your heroics teacher to come in now, Aizawa stated. Today's lesson will be different. You will be focusing on rescue missions. The class started talking excitedly about that. Aizawa hesitated before saying, since we lack the proper facilities to have it here, we will be transported to separate location. This means a field trip. Cheers broke out from nearly half of the class. Even at Hero School, students looked forward to field trips. Kaminari held up a hand. Please tell us we won't have to do schoolwork while on the trip. Aizawa said, the field trip is the schoolwork. The fervor somewhat subsided. For this trip, you can either change into your gym uniforms or your hero costumes. Aizawa went on. However, I would personally recommend you go with your costumes. The more accustomed you are to your suits, the more you will grow. Midoriya, since your costume is still under repair from last time, you will have to go with your gym clothes. Izuku was still unhappy over the damage to his suit on the battlefield. His mother had given him that clothing. It was nostalgic even if he didn't think it was the best. he could at least redesign it to provide more alternatives for defense. You have 20 minutes to change and meet up outside in the courtyard for the bus. Do not be late, Aizawa stated. As instructed by Aizawa, the remainder of the class changed and gathered in the courtyard. Iida, meanwhile, was attempting to line up everyone. Uraraka turned to facing Yaoyorozu and asked, Iida made seating charts. Isn't that, like, your job or something? The class representative retorted, when we were first informed about the field trips, Iida offered to make them. He was very enthusiastic. Iida was able to form a straight line by rounding the class. If the cats were teens with superpowers who were more eager to utilize them than to obey laws, it would be like herding cats. But when Iida saw the inside of the buses, her happiness turned to sorrow. You see, UA chose to purchase or rent vehicles that resembled public transportation in place of the typical school buses that one could imagine. Iida's meticulously designed seating map was therefore pointless. Aizawa took the seat closest to the driver as the students and she piled in. Izuku and 7 other classmates took seats close to the back. A tall, muscular boy on his right was dressed in a yellow bodysuit that exposed his eyes, nose, and mouth. He had on a belt, boots, and white gloves. At least Izuku recalled that his last name was Sato. Asui, the frog girl, and Kirishima, the red-haired, spiky man, were at Izuku's left. To the left and right of Izuku were Kaminari, Aoyama, the horned pink girl, Ashido, and a dejected Iida. Hero rumors, hypotheses about their destination, who was cool in what, and so forth dominated the voyage. For the most part, Izuku stayed to himself. Asui said, Hey, Midoriya, turning to look at him. You know I'm pretty honest when I talk to people, right? Startled, Izuku turned to face her. I guess. Normally, Izuku focused more on her quirk than on how she interacted with others. He had to practice his social skills, man. Izuku stumbled. What do you want to know, Asui? But Asui interrupted him. Just call me Sue. Everyone else already does. Okay. Sue, what do you want to know? Well, it's not really a question. More of a statement really. Sue went on. Midoriya, your quirk is deceptively overpowered. And Izuku said, Huh? Well, besides the general gist of telekinesis, you can fly, make yourself tough and strong, freeze people in place like you did with Bakugo, and make really powerful blasts. Sue clarified. Yeah, didn't you do the same thing with the 0-pointer back in the entrance exam? Replied Sato. Izuku gave a tense shrug. I don't know. I was sort of out of it both times. Still, mad respect to Bakugo for taking your attack like that if it could wreck the 0-pointer like that, Kirishima said. That was pretty manly. In response, Sato said, Yeah, I guess. Still, I wish I had a flashier quirk like Bakugo. Or you, Midoriya. All I can do is harden my skin and make it spiky. Izuku reassured, that's still a good quirk. You can shield people from debris while being strong enough to lift any rubble or fight against a villain. Kirishima groaned, yeah, but I need something that makes me stand out more. Aoyama glistened and said, besides, if anyone has the flashiest quirk, it would be moi. My naval laser practically calls to being a ray of elegance. Ashido taunted, yeah, until you get a tummy ache for using it too long. The majority of the audience laughed at this. Speaking flashy quirks, I would definitely say Bakugo and Todoroki are big candidates for future top 10 pros. Stated Kirishima. You guys saw how Todoroki froze that warehouse. He's uber powerful. Too bad we barely know anything about besides being Mr. Ice Prince, Ashido said. Plus, Bakugo is way too angry to be the #1 hero, Sue said. Bakugo shouted, what did you say about me, Frogface? From the front. Kaminari yelled, yeah, too bad Bakugo has the charm of stinking dumpster fire, which caused him to chuckle. You think you're funny, Thunderbolt? Why don't you say that to my fist? Aizawa admonished from the front, don't make me come back there. The noise subsided as Bakugo turned around. Izuku grinned, but he was shocked on the inside. A year or two earlier, this would never have occurred. Everyone would be laughing with Kacchan because of his peculiarity and fame, and they would typically make fun of Izuku. The roles were now flipped. Izuku joined the group of people who were laughing at Kacchan since he was the idiot. At the same time, it felt incredibly strange and somewhat pleasant. The bus finally reached its destination. Izuku began to hear a faint ringing sound in his ears as he was stepping off the bus. When he stepped down from the doorframe, Uraraka saw this and came over. Uraraka worriedly said, Hey, are you okay? You look a bit lightheaded. I'm fine, assured Izuku. I probably got up too fast. The ringing never left Izuku as the other students filed inside. The building's exterior was a huge, silver-colored opaque dome. It was equally magnificent inside. Natural disasters were recreated in a variety of zones, ranging from landslides in rural areas to destroyed metropolitan landscapes. A figure in a large, bulky astronaut outfit stood in the middle. Uraraka exclaimed, "Oh my gosh, that's 13. With delight. She's one of my favorites." The class was waved to by the space hero herself. 13 welcomed the class, saying, "Hi, kids, and welcome to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or just the USJ for short." A number of students commented on how the term resembled Universal Studios Japan. For a private discussion, Aizawa drew 13 away. Whispering, "Where's All Might?" Aizawa said, "He was supposed to be here already." "He got caught up with some early morning hero work," said 13. "I got a message that he's recovering in the teacher's lounge. I'm sure he'll be back shortly." Aizawa let out a sigh. "Fine. We'll pull double duty on supervising until he shows up." 13 returned her focus to the class and nodded. Before providing her own response, 13 questioned the students. "Before we get into specifics, I want to bring a question to the class. Does anyone know what my quirk is?" "My quirk is called Black Hole. I can summon black holes at will through my suit. While it is incredibly useful for removing debris, it can also be extremely dangerous to civilians. Fighting villains isn't the only way a hero can use their quirks." 13 gestured to her surroundings. The USJ was designed to simulate many disasters you will face in your future hero careers. Our goal is to help you expand your quirk and skills into rescue missions. You all know how your quirks can harm people. By the end of today, you will know how to use your quirks to help people. Izuku would have wished he had been focused on 13's remarks. But the ringing in his head had been getting louder ever since he entered. Ignoring and pushing it away was more difficult. Uraraka was the first to detect his condition. "Oh my, Deku, your nose, it's bleeding." Izuku checked with 2 fingers up. Yes, it was indeed his blood. Fortunately, he had a pack of tissues. But the ringing got too much as he started to clog his nostrils, and Izuku clutched his head in agony. Uraraka said, "Deku, are you okay?" in a terrified tone. Izuku flinched in agony. I can't," she said. "Can't you hear it? It's so loud." "Deku, I don't hear anything. What's going on?" Some of the other pupils began to notice at this point. "Really, how are you guys unable to hear that?" Izuku was in a panic. Something's wrong. I don't know, but... Arg. It's the ringing. You have to hear it, right?" Jiro, the female with the headphone jack earlobes, attempted to diffuse the tension by saying, "Midoriya, you need to chill. None of us hear anything." Even though the volume was overwhelming and deafening, Izuku could clearly perceive his peers' bewilderment. Izuku sobbed in agony, "Please, you must listen to me. Something's wrong. I don't know why, but seriously, it's so loud. Why can't you hear that? Please tell me I'm not the only one who hears the ringing." In Midoriya, the ringing stops faster than a blink. Dark gateways appear on one of the hills overlooking the grounds before anyone can comment. Hundreds of ominous-looking men and women emerge. Kirishima remarked, "Whoa, I didn't know we were going to deal with prop villains so early." Aizawa affirmed, "Those aren't fake. They're real villains." Izuku turned and saw 3 people standing atop one of the higher cliffs. A tall, lanky man in a black bodysuit stood in the center. He was a slouched figure with light gray hair. The blackened hands clutching the man's face and arms added to the eerie atmosphere. A bartender's suit with yellow eyes and what appeared to be a black and purple mist was at the man's left. What could only be called a monster stood to the right. The object was enormous and monstrous. Its huge muscles protruded beneath the black skin, even tearing through it. The head was the most horrific. It featured beady yellow eyes, a massive beak full of fangs, and an exposed brain that occupied the upper half of the head. Whether consciously or unconsciously, Izuku knew that those 3 were the most hazardous of all. The man with the hands snarled, "Where is he? It said he was supposed to be here. Why isn't All Might here?" "Master Shigaraki," said the suit-clad shadow. "Perhaps the schedule was incorrect. Or the faculty changed it after your break-in." Shigaraki raised his arms in front of the horde of villains and said, "Great, and just when I went through the trouble of bringing all my friends to kill the #1 hero." The heroes were devising a method of escape in the meantime. Aizawa gave the command, 13, take the kids and make a run for it. Try and call the school. Use your quirks if you have to." "But Aizawa, sir, You're an underground hero. You can't take on all of them at once, Izuku said. Midoriya, you don't become a pro by being a one-trick pony, Aizawa said, donning his goggles. Now, go. Izuku wished he could stay behind and assist as the villains charged toward Aizawa. But he was wise enough not to defy his master. Izuku went to an upper exit with 13 and the rest of his students. When Izuku turned around, he saw that the villains had tried to use their quirks but had been wiped out. Hey, what the hell? Aizawa's attack interrupted their inquiries. With his great fighting skills, the man defeated villain after villain, moving like a swift river. If Izuku weren't currently in a life or death situation, he would have liked to watch this. 13 asked the pupils, anyone have anything to communicate to the outside world? Kaminari replied, I can use my quirk to power a radio. Do it and call for help. Before responding, Kaminari checked his headset equipment. All I'm getting is static, they must be jamming us or something. 13 cursed. Everyone, head to the exit, now. A well-known portal blocked the group's path as they headed for the exit. The man in the suit blocked the exit as he stepped out. The wispy man added, I'm sorry, but we can't have any guests leave early. Everyone stopped, including 13. 13 said, what do you want, villain? How impolite of me to not introduce myself, the enigmatic man said, bowing. My name is Kurogiri, of the League of Villains. I welcome you to witness the completion of our goal, that is. Kurogiri got up again, killing the symbol of peace. 13 did her best to protect the children. 13 muttered, okay, of all of you, which one is the fastest? Iida responded, that would be me, Ms. 13. Alright, I'll distract the villain. As soon as you see an opening, you use your quirk to get out of here. Get to Ua, get the teachers, and get back as fast as you can. I can't leave all of you here to fight these villains on your own, Iida yelled. 13 sighed. Listen, Iida, right? I understand where you're coming from. You want to stay by your friends no matter what. But being a hero means acknowledging that sometimes the most important thing you can do is find help. Strength in numbers, right? Do you understand? Iida gave a nod. Yes, sir, I do. 13 then returned her focus to Kurogiri. The pair stood up, prepared to move. Everyone's attention was diverted by the sound of an explosion before 13 could move. Kirishima and Bakugo hurried to attack Kurogiri. Bakugo shouted, die, you shadowy freak show, and delivered a blow laced with explosives. The portal user dodged Kirishima's quirk-enhanced fist and quickly stepped out of the explosion's path. Annoying brats. Away with you. Kurogiri then hurled several portals in the class's direction. Kirishima and Bakugo were struck immediately. A number of them entered the crowd and transported more pupils. Additionally, one surrounded Izuku, giving him a close-up view. Izuku fought in the pitch-black interior. He soon felt the rush of the wind in the wide air. In relation to the wind, Izuku hardly had time to realize that he was descending through the atmosphere. He hit the water hard and yelled. It hurt a lot more to land in the water than it should have, based on Izuku's scant pool experience, anyway. To see beneath the waves, he strained his eyes. His eyesight was surrounded by blue. Then, in the hopes that he would surface before drowning, Izuku attempted to swim up. Izuku heard muffled noises that warned him of anything ahead. He was being pursued by a villain who was fully outfitted in diving gear. Izuku made an effort to swim more quickly, although it was difficult because of his heavy clothing. He made an attempt to summon his quirk. Izuku hoped enough time had gone by because he knew he required breaks after nosebleeds. His quirk didn't feel right in the water. Compared to land, it was less accurate. Izuku pushed the region of water in front of him in his mind like a child splashing in the sea, rather than pushing the villain. The invisible hand pushed the villain off course. But Izuku's ability to hold his breath became increasingly difficult. He felt dread. Would he perish in the water? Izuku felt something sticky wrap around his waist as his eyelids began to get heavier and heavier. Then he was yanked quickly from the water and onto a firm surface. Izuku cleared the water from his chest with a cough and then met his savior's gaze. Sue was the one. Mineta was also present. Then Sue said, hey, you okay? Izuku said, yeah, and then he sat down. Are you guys alright? Mineta said, alright? You think this is alright? We're being attacked by villains on a field trip, got portaled and nearly drowned, and now we're surrounded by bloodthirsty villains who want to do horrible, unspeakable things to us, and you ask us if we're alright? Sue and Izuku exchanged glances. Sue replied, we're fine, for now. Izuku turned away from the boat they were standing on. It seems that Kurogiri transported them to the shipwreck zone by teleportation. Other zones emerged in the distance, and boats drifted above the ocean. If it weren't for what was going on above and below the river, it would be peaceful. Okay, Izuku said, regulating his respiration. I saw one villain while I was underwater. What about you two? I saw a good chunk, about 4 or 5 of them underwater. Sue clarified. Some of them had aquatic quirks. Some had scuba gear. What about yours? Mine was in scuba gear as well. Mineta, what about you? The small youngster said, I saw about, 2. It's not like I checked them out. I climbed up on here for dear life. Izuku said, so, there's about 8 or so villains underwater right now. Did you knock any of them out, Sue? No, they didn't see me. Plus, I was too fast for them to keep up. Sue replied. If it was that guy's intent to send us to our deaths, he did a pretty bad job at it. I mean, if he wanted to kill me, then he would have sent me to one of those burning zones, not a lake. Speaking of that, said Mineta. So, are you like a frog with human traits or a human with frog traits? Sue side-eyed him and asked, the latter. Why? According to Mineta, who was examining Sue's chest, no reason. Stop it. Yes, ma'am. Look, we can't let those villains go free under there. We have to stop them, Izuku responded. Mineta said, we? Are you insane? We're just kids, and they're trained supervillains. I know your quirk is cool and all, but you can't fight all of them and win. We have to wait till the heroes come and save us. That's why I'm not fighting alone. I need both of your help too. Besides, fighting villains is what we're learning to do. Just a bit earlier than we'd like. Plus, who's to say by the time rescue arrives, we'd all be dead, replied Sue. Mineta whimpered but silently consented to assist. First, we need to know what we can do. I'll go first, Izuku stated. My quirk is telekinesis. I can lift multiple objects with my mind. The heaviest object I moved was the 1-pointers back in the entrance exam, but I think can move bigger stuff than that. What about you? When Sue said, I can do anything a frog can, I'm as good underwater as on land. I can jump pretty high, and my tongue is elastic. Mineta. The boy remained silent. Mineta? Mineta looked over at them. Fine. I can detach my hair as sticky balls and throw them at people. I don't see how that's going to help here. Izuku muttered to himself, sticky, 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 and then snapped his fingers. Mineta, you're a genius. I am? Inquired Mineta. I mean, I like to think I am, but why? Everyone, group huddle. They all three moved closer to one another. Okay, I think I got it. I'll use my telekinesis to sense the villains. It covers a wider area underwater than above. Once I hook all the villains in my grasp, I'll launch them above water. Sue, you lasso Mineta and throw him high up. That's when Mineta will launch his balls at the villains. If we get this right, all the villains will be stuck together and captured, just like the battle trail. Izuku clarified. Mineta asked, and what if that doesn't work? I know it's not exactly foolproof, but it's what we got. Can I count on you? Mineta nodded after hesitating. Sue grinned. And you're the one who gave up the role of vice representative because you thought you weren't a leader. Izuku reddened. Honestly, I'm not good at leading. I'm just good with quirks. Izuku was elbowed by Sue. I got your back. The trio got ready. Sue encircled Mineta with her tongue. Izuku focused while resting his hands on the bow. He moved through the water and locked onto the criminals below by using his telekinesis. Izuku said, Hey, Mineta, how many balls can you rip off? Mineta said, a good chunk before my scalp starts to bleed. Good thing I don't do that anime nosebleed thing you do, huh? Get ready. All three stiffened. Izuku held off until. Now. Izuku raised his hands in the air. The villains all emerged from the water at the same moment. They dangled in the air, and they watched in astonishment. Mineta flew into the air as Sue whipped her tongue forward. The child threw ball after ball upon the villains while yelling a war cry. As they were bombarded with sticky ball after sticky ball, they gasped. The majority covered their body, but some also covered their limbs. With a cry of, back, Izuku clasped his fists together. As if they were ensnared in a singularity, the villains were drawn together. As they writhed and struggled to free themselves, they all adhered to one another. The villains dropped into the lake, imprisoned like a grape-shaped buoy, once Izuku released his hold. Mineta rolled onto the deck and Sue pulled him back in. Mineta exclaimed, we did it, we freakin' did it, with joy. Sue turned to face the seated Izuku and casually wiped her tongue. You okay? You're not bleeding again, are you? Sue responded. Izuku replied, I'm fine, just need a few seconds to catch my breath. The three of them paused to unwind. But fighting was still going on outside their small area. Izuku turned to face Aizawa, who was still engaged in combat. We need to get off this boat and go help our classmates, Izuku responded. Mineta said, whoa, and stopped. I agreed to help defeat these villains. I did not agree to go risk my life fighting every single villain in this building. How can you say that? We're heroes in training. It's our responsibility to fight against evil and helping others, Izuku responded. Look, I'll admit, defeating those villains, Mineta glanced toward the water, was pretty cool, but we're kids. We're not supposed to deal with this. You can run off and get yourself killed out there. I'll stay here and wait till help arrives. Izuku intended to say something disparaging to Mineta, but Sue outwitted him. Sue said, I'm going with Midoriya. What? Mineta asked. I said I'm going with Midoriya. Maybe you're right and we should sit and wait till the heroes arrive. But who knows how many of our friends are going to get hurt if we do nothing? I'd rather fight as a hero than stay here with a short pervert who wears a diaper. Mineta crossed his arms, scooted away from Sue, and pouted because he couldn't think of anything to say in response. However, Izuku was thinking of something else. He inquired, is that a diaper? It's supposed to be a bowl, Mineta said, gesturing to his hair. Like a bowl of grapes. Besides, the diaper enhances my cuteness. Mineta, I'm going to be honest with you. That diaper does not make you look cute, Sue said. Ah, Izuku said, so, how do we get across the lake? Sue replied, I should be able to leap to shore, what about you? Mineta said, hey, don't forget about me, as she walked up to the pair. Someone needs to make sure you two don't kill yourselves out there. The boy's change of heart made Izuku grin. Well, I can fly, Izuku said, his cheeks ablaze with shame. But it's like my third time trying and the first time with passengers. Mineta said, I vote flying, I always wanted to fly. Sue said, yeah, but perhaps Midoriya should conserve his strength. After all, his quirk's more powerful than ours. Izuku nodded grudgingly. You're right, Sue. So, how are we going to? I call dibs. Mineta clung to Sue's back like a baby spider monkey to its mother at once. Sue wasn't exactly amused. Watch the hands, Buster. Got it. Sue looked across to Izuku. She said, I hope the tongue doesn't bother you. Izuku gave a shrug. It saved my life the first time. I think I can deal with it. Man. Did it feel weirder when he wasn't preoccupied with drowning? Sue slid her tongue around Izuku. Sue jumped like a frog and squatted. Izuku was tugged along with a tug. Before reaching the coast, the three of them sailed through the air. After lowering Izuku and dropping Mineta, Sue unraveled him. Their field trip became a war, and the three of them gazed out into the open. The UA Trespass event came and went in the news cycle swiftly, despite being so fresh. For a few days, it was trending, and a lot of comments were critical of the news-hungry reporters that broke into a well-funded hero school in search of an all-might scoop. In a public statement, UA attributed the brief defense failure to a computer malfunction and promised that the staff would not only repair but also upgrade the system in question. Nothing was known about the hooded man who had broken the wall or his intentions. According to the Hero Safety Committee's recommendation, Principal Nezu was officially powerless to take any action. It was bad enough that journalists were evading the security of Japan's most prestigious hero school, but to expose that it was a deliberate break-in by a villain was far worse. The committee stated that it would be disastrous. The people would lament and lose faith in heroes. As a result, the committee advised Nezu to disregard his evidence. They assured him that everything would be under control by the committee. Nezu made the unofficial decision to act underhandedly and disregard that directive. Nezu located the first-year class schedule that the villain had taken pictures of and discreetly phoned the locations where Class 1A and 1B will be attending during the month. Class 1B's trip to the USJ was slated for next week, while Class 1A was scheduled to visit the unforeseen simulation joint on Wednesday. Nezu thus requested his favor and gained entry to the security systems. Wednesday is the trip for Class 1A. Before grabbing some tea, Nezu was keeping an eye on the feeds for any unexpected villain drop-ins. Nezu saw numerous additional persons in a number of the cameras by the time he returned. He examined the situation from a variety of perspectives to determine that the intruders were indeed villains, and this was not included in the course. To find out how many people were in the class, Nezu veered to different directions. Eraserhead, 13, and all 20 of 1A's classmates were there and accounted for. Oddly, All Might did not appear on the trip even though he was signed up. Because of the school's policy of keeping phones off when on field excursions, Nezu was unable to just call any of the children. Nezu attempted to use the pro's unique frequencies, but all he got was static. Nezu recalled managing the student-submitted hero costumes and the support course's final designs. Denki Kaminari, one of the boys, had a communications device integrated into his outfit. According to his notes, the radio could be powered by his quirk to tune in to specific long-range frequencies. Nezu sought to make a call after tuning onto the frequency. Static was all that was released. This was definitely not good. Whoever these villains were, they planned ahead to jam communications in order to cut off the pupils from the outside world. But there was still one puzzle piece lacking. Nezu gave his secretary a buzz. Nezu spoke into the speaker. Have you seen All Might recently, and if so, could you tell me where he is? The buzzing voice answered, All Might's in the teacher's lounge. He's resting after some morning hero work. Nezu secretly resented the unending bravery and selflessness of his old friend. Despite his current condition, Toshinori will always put the needs of others before his own, even if doing so causes him long-term pain. Nezu hopes he is mistaken in his worry that self-sacrificing character will lead to the demise of All Might. Nevertheless, Nezu had to hurry to the teacher's lounge, so enough criticizing his pals. Nezu resorted to something more comfortable because the walk was too far for his small legs. Leaping to the floor, Nezu unlocked a grates beneath the desk. He installed a number of access tunnels throughout UA, and he crawled in one of them. Like the rats he was frequently compared to, there was a part of him that enjoyed the cramped, dim hallways. That's what Nezu would say. Either way, Nezu headed for the teacher's lounge. He could see Toshinori, in his diminutive form, resting on one of the couches from his private area. He was breathing deliberately and periodically swigging from few pouches of juice. He gazed so intently that Nezu needed to subtly announce his presence. Nezu still went straight down into the teacher's lounge despite this. Toshinori was taken aback. Gah, Principal Nezu, don't surprise me like that. You nearly gave me a heart attack. That's the least of your worries, Toshinori. Class 1A's field trip to the USJ is currently under attack by an unknown group of villains, Nezu calmly stated. Toshinori's expression turned to horror. What? Toshinori said as he got to his feet. Gah, I have go. They need me. Toshinori's face fell in shame at Nezu's statement. Yes, to the field trip you were supposed to be at 5 minutes ago. I don't mean to be harsh, and as much as I would like to lecture you over balancing your responsibilities as a hero and a teacher, those kids need you right now. Nezu replied. We'll still have that talk afterwards. Toshinori put on his heroic bulk. I got it, replied All Might, the hero. Then, causing a stir in the teacher's lounge, he hurried out the door. Nezu fixed his tie and smoothed off some of his fur. Nezu thought to himself, well, it seems I have quite a few calls to make. Izuku, Sue, and Mineta, meanwhile, were crowded together on top of a hill at the USJ. They watched as the building descended into anarchy. Aizawa, also known as Eraserhead, their homeroom teacher, was fighting a horde of villains by himself. 13 and a few kids were battling the portal creating Kurogiri near the entryway. Finally, the remaining classmates, who were engaged in combat with their own squad of villains, were dispersed throughout the building. So, began Izuku. What do we do? Mineta squeaked. I'd say we head for the entrance and get out of here, it's what Aizawa told us to do. But what he needs help, or what about our classmates? I think Mr. Aizawa got himself covered, Sue said, gesturing toward the central plaza. Although Aizawa was frequently outnumbered 5-1, he was systematically outperforming the villains like a pro. They appeared to be doing well, as were their classmates. In the landslide zone directly ahead, a massive ice wall materialized. There's Todoroki, remarks Sue. A burst of yellow lightning danced along the mountainous area to their right. There's Kaminari, revealed Mineta. A huge explosion erupted in the area of ruins to their left. And that's Kachan, Izuku faintly said. As a result, their peers were performing better than anticipated. Okay. I guess we should just head for the exit. Are you guys okay with that? Izuku responded. Mineta said, yes, I am more than okay with that. Sue gestured to the two surviving villains and said, but we had better keep an eye out for those two. The beaked monster and the shabby-looking man with the hands. Like lions staking a gazelle, they were circling the plaza. Izuku gave a nod. Let's go. Slowly, the three of them moved toward the entrance. They stayed low as they moved around the square, They saw the final of Aizawa's villains vanquished. But the guy with the hands summoned the beast to strike. The underground hero was overpowered by the huge monster's overwhelming strength, and Eraserhead was already exhausted from his prior battles. The monster would strike the pro with a huge fist whenever Eraserhead's hair rose, indicating that his quirk was activating. To the monster, Aizawa was nothing more than a rag doll. It continuously slammed him against the ground. The three of them froze in terror at the sounds of bones breaking and Aizawa's agonized cries. They could only observe from a distance. The man with the hands finally came toward Aizawa, bloodied and battered, and the monster was holding him down. The man said, "Tisk, tisk," once. "I'll admit, Eraserhead, you're pretty good. You took down those guys like dominoes. Sure, they were cannon fodder, but winning against 20-to-1 odds is impressive. Too bad you won't see the end of today. Look on the bright side, your corpse would make for a pretty picture for the news. Nomu, kill him." Nomu, the monster, lifted a huge fist above Aizawa's head. The Nomu lowered his fist in a spooky silence. The man waited for the squeaking sound of a hero's skull, but it never came. Rather, a foot or so above Aizawa's head, the man discovered Nomu's fist. It appeared as though the arm was straining against an unseen force. The man commanded, "What are you doing, Nomu? Kill him already." As it attempted to destroy the Eraser hero's head, the Nomu grunted inhumanly. However, nothing changed. The man found Mineta, Sue, and Izuku by looking around. Izuku was the one instigating problems, as seen by his outstretched hands and focused expression, while the other two were watched from behind. "Jigo!" Izuku yelled strainedly. "I don't know how much longer I can do this." It would have pleased Izuku if his pals had begun running for the door, primarily because it felt like he was lifting a boulder to contain the Nomu's punch. Regretfully, Mineta and Sue were immobilized. Gasping out, "Jigo!" Aizawa said. "Run, oh, looks like some meddling kids decided to stick around." The dad replied. "Nomu, get rid of the kid with the green hair." The Nomu looked around to see who it was aiming for. Izuku. Izuku stumbled as the Nomu drew its arm back. Izuku's back felt as though a burden had been lifted. That did not, however, imply their safety. The Nomu ran to Izuku's side more quickly than could be seen. Izuku felt everything slow down, whether it was adrenaline or anything else. The Nomu's arm drew back to strike, blotting out the light. Izuku hardly had time to erect a wall around himself. Izuku was backhanded by the Nomu. The boy was flying when he felt his back strike the ground. He rolled about a few times before he stopped. Izuku still felt like he was struck by a truck with full force despite the barrier. He had to work hard to open his eyes and realize that he had landed 30 feet from his current position. The man began to move away, but Aizawa grabbed his leg first. The villain was unfazed by his valiant defiance, though. The villain merely leaned over and used all 5 fingers to touch Aizawa's elbow. Though brief, it was sufficient for his quirk to function. Aizawa's elbow deteriorated, and he growled in agony. Muscle and skin deteriorated till bone showed through. He released his grip on the villain's foot. For what could only be characterized as trivial reasons, the villain kicked Aizawa in the face. "Nomu, come back and make sure Eraserhead's not going to be using his quirk anytime soon," the man gave the command. To its master the Nomu bounded. Aizawa was unable to see anything clearly since it pushed his head into the ground. Then the man turned to face Mineta and Sue. "You know," thought the villain, "maybe if we decorate this place with dead kids, then All Might will get here quicker." The two heroes in training were approached by the villain. They couldn't flee or move because they were paralyzed with fear. "Let's see who's going to go first. Eeny, meeny, miny, you." Sue was pointed to by the villain. The man came up to her, his hand extended, tears streaming down her cheeks. Behind her, Mineta flinched. Izuku saw Sue's imminent death when he looked up. He was pummeled and bruised, and the taste of his own blood was already in his tongue. Even though his thoughts was racing, he was extremely concentrated. There was nothing he could do to stop his buddies from dying. As Kachan had repeatedly told him throughout the years, he was worthless. Izuku might already be crying from the pain, but he still wanted to cry. He can't, yet he wants to assist. Then something inside him started to burn. He was urged to use his quirk, his power, by a silent voice. He could be a hero, so he wasn't worthless. Only if he pushes through the discomfort. Izuku got himself up slowly. Like he was tossing a ball, he palmed his right hand. He let out a loud shout and used all of his strength to shove his arm. The building sounded like thunder. A blast of telekinetic energy blazed directly toward the villain's outstretched arm. Far from Sue and Mineta, it sent the villain sprawling across the field. Izuku used his arms to stop himself from falling and lay there, breathing slowly. The villain was not defeated, though. The outcomes weren't pleasant. Unnaturally, the villain's arm was hunched back at the elbow. In relation to the rest of the body, the forearm hung freely. The villain let out a painful wail. His other hand struggled with itself. He wanted to bandage the wound but didn't want to cause further damage to his arm. Beside him, a portal opened, and Kurogiri emerged. The gateway villain appeared concerned despite his thin face. "Master Shigaraki, we must leave immediately. You are in need of urgent medical care," remarked Kurogiri. Shigaraki forced himself to say, "No, despite the anguish. Not until I see them dead." "What about the rest of the brats?" "The rest of them are still in the building. Unfortunately, one escaped while I was distracted. If you weren't our ticket out of here, I'd kill you. Now I'm not leaving until that kid is dead for what he did to me." Shigaraki glanced at Izuku. "Nomu, kill that one." Still waiting for commands above Aizawa, the Nomu suddenly sprang to life and followed his master's eyes to Izuku. Izuku understood he couldn't protect himself in this way since his vision was rapidly failing. Everyone's attention was drawn to a booming boom before the Nomu could charge. The entry caught everyone's attention. Behind him, Izuku could only see the silhouette obscured by the intense light. Despite being in excruciating pain, Shigaraki seemed ecstatic when she said, "He's here." "How dare you?" All Might's recognizable voice reverberated throughout the interior. "Attacking a school full of children during their field trip. A place of learning and sanctuary. Well, it's time for these students' nightmare to end. Do you want to know why?" Izuku grinned, mouthing his mentor's words as the blackness of oblivion took him. "Because I am here." With a moan, Midoriya strained his eyes against the intense brightness. Izuku just wanted to roll over back to sleep because of the soreness and the covers. He still managed to sit up, though. The unfamiliar room he was in caused his eyes to adjust. Izuku identified it as the medical facility. He was able to locate two individuals by looking around. A man dressed like a noir detective and a bustling recovery girl. Seeing that Izuku was awake, the detective stood up. A detective said, "Hello, how are you feeling?" Izuku observed that his voice sounded halting when he said, "I'm a bit sore." He extracted 2 cotton tubes from his nose while looking down. After discarding the bloody tubes, he turned to the investigator. "Well, I wouldn't be surprised. After all, Recovery Girl did use her quirk on you." As the youthful heroine vanished into another room, the detective gave her a thumbs up, but she either ignored him or didn't hear him. "Anyway, my name is Detective Tsukachi." The detective gave a tip. Izuku let out a gasp. "You mean the same one who worked with All Might and has a truth-telling quirk?" "The very same. I'm sorry I didn't recognize you earlier, sir. It's just, well." With a smile, Detective Tsukachi said, "I'm rather plain looking. Don't worry, I get that a lot." After pulling up a chair next to Izuku's bed, Tsukachi sat down. "I hope you don't mind me asking so soon, but will you be willing to give your perspective on the recent USJ event?" Izuku questioned, "Is this for a police thing?" "Yes, and this can be completely confidential. It won't be issued to the press and will only be used for solving the case," Tsukachi reassured him. "Well, before we start, can I ask a few questions?" "Of course. The last thing I remember before passing out was All Might showing up. What happened after that?" "All Might engaged the creature called Nomu. From what we gathered, it was an artificial creation with multiple quirks, such as shock absorption and hyper-regeneration. The villains also described it as a weapon specifically designed to defeat All Might." "What happened?" "All Might beat it. Sent it flying 400 meters from the USJ where the police have detained it. As for the rest of the villains, most of them have been arrested. However, the ringleader, the one called Shigaraki, and the one called Kurogiri teleported before the rest of the heroes could apprehend them." Izuku worriedly inquired, "What about my fellow classmates? What about Mr. Aizawa? Are they okay?" "Luckily, most of your fellow students managed to make it out with minor injuries or less, especially thanks to young Ida intercepting the rest of UA's heroes after escaping. As for your teachers..." Detective Tsukachi's beaming grin faded slightly. "Both Eraserhead and 13 suffered critical injuries. Fortunately, they both are expected to make full recoveries in the next couple of weeks." Izuku sighed with relief. Izuku said, "Thank you. It was just, everything that was happening, it was just a lot to react." Tsukachi, the detective, nodded. I understand it has been quite an unpleasant couple of hours for you and your classmates. If you don't want to talk right now, that's fine. No, sir, I'm ready to answer your questions. Perfect, the detective said, taking out a pencil and paper. Would you tell me everything you can remember about the USJ incident? Izuku shifted in his hospital bed and said, well, it all started when I was getting out of the bus. The real All Might covered himself in a blanket and hid inside an ambulance. He cracked his aching bones and coughed blood onto a paper towel. The number one hero didn't feel like he won, even though he defeated the Nomu today. Nezu scurried in as the door opened and shut it behind him. All Might said, hello, Nezu, and then coughed into the towel once more. The principal, and the same to you, Toshinori, he continued. How are you feeling? Emotionally, Toshinori moaned. Physically? Fine, Recovery Girl made sure of that. Guilty, on one hand. And on the other, I'm starting to feel like my age. The symbol of peace attempted to sit up before he started coughing again. I know you want to lecture me, Nezu, but I've already learned my lesson. If I hadn't stopped to fix every little crime on my way here, if I just left it to the other heroes, I would have been here and stopped this thing from happening at all. Toshinori could see nothing in Nezu's unblinking gaze. It's just, ever since I got One for All, I feel like I have to help in any way I can. Because I have the power to do so. I am going to focus on my teaching career, Nezu, I promise. It's just hard letting other people help, I guess. Nezu let out a sigh. Well, you may have dodged a rant from me, but that doesn't mean you'll be off the hook from everyone, especially Aizawa. With a grunt, All Might took the Eraser Hero's eventual derision. Anyway, I must say congrats are in order for defeating a monster designed to kill you. Not many heroes are able to say that during their careers, Nezu went on. All Might went on to say, yeah, and that's where my feeling my age comment came from. After learning that Monster had multiple quirks designed to counter my attacks, I went beyond the limit. In my heyday, it would have taken 5 mighty punches to down the beast. Now, it took over 200 before I sent that thing flying. Once more, All Might coughed into the towel. All Might came to Nezu and said, I have to select a successor because my time as the symbol of peace is coming to an end. You are going to cancel the rest of the school week? What kind of dastardly fellow would I be? Nezu asked in a tone that was pretended to be hurt. Sending children back to school after they were involved in a villain attack near school grounds. Right, well, as I can, I'm going to get in contact with young Mirio and offer being my successor personally. Then, I'll pray he'll actually accept the deal. Another moan from All Might. I bet you're grinning ear to ear about being right, aren't you? Nezu said, to be honest, this is one of the few times I wish I wasn't. Still, I'd also recommend you getting in touch with Sir Night-Eye. After all, he is Mirio's current heroic mentor, and he's put in a lot of time making Mirio the best hero the kid can be. Yeah, said All Might. Then there was a knock on the door again. Detective Tsukachi was there when it opened, and he waved briefly before closing the door. In his early days, All Might would form an alliance with Tsukachi, who was a rookie at the time, to obtain first-hand information about police activity. Few heroes had a direct interaction with All Might and Tsukachi, despite the fact that numerous heroes worked with law enforcement. Both men gained notoriety and status as a result of their collaboration, which produced success after triumph. Nevertheless, Tsukachi would become one of the few people who truly understood All Might's predicament, and the two men would become close friends and steadfast allies. Good afternoon, gentlemen, Tsukachi said, tilting his hat in toast. Nezu and Toshinori returned the greeting. As of now, we've gotten witness reports from both the students and the teachers, not counting Eraserhead and Thriding, added the police officer. How are they doing? Inquired Toshinori. They're being overseen by Recovery Girl herself, though I can tell Eraserhead hates being fussed over like that. Well, I'll be honest, I for one am glad things ended this way. Minor injuries on the students, no casualties on either side, and a majority of the villains were arrested. Shame we couldn't catch the two at the top, but that's why we'll keep looking for them. Besides, things could have been much worse without the hero's arrival. Nezu concluded. Those two, thought All Might. The overdramatic, skinny man with the hands and the broken arm. Plus, that shadowy fellow who teleported both of them away. Do we know their names? The man covered in hands was identified as Shigaraki, while the teleporter was identified as Kurogiri. So far, nothing we pulled up have any information on them. Tsukachi responded. Nezu remarked, this is the first time I've heard about the broken arm. I wonder who did that? When Tsukachi said, from at least 3 eyewitness reports, Izuku Midoriya with his quirk, he checked to make sure no one else was listening. Do you mind if I ask a few off-the-book questions about Midoriya? Of course. Sure. From school records, it lists Midoriya's quirk as telekinesis. Do you two know if Midoriya ever displayed precognition? Hero and Principal exchanged a short glance before turning to face the detective. No, this is a new development for me, Nezu replied. Yes, I have never heard of young Midoriya showing precognition before, said Toshinori. Well, I did some unofficial training with the boy before the entrance exam, and he never showed anything about precognition. Nezu questioned, did Midoriya see the villain attack coming? After searching through his notebook, Tsukachi came across Izuku's report. According to Midoriya, he first started to hear a ringing noise after getting off the bus at the USJ. At first writing it off as low blood sugar, the ringing continued to stay with him and grew with intensity. During 13's speech, Midoriya suffers from quirk-related nosebleeds while the ringing increased. While questioning other students, they confirmed that only Midoriya was able to hear the ringing despite being in the presence of those with hearing-enhancing quirks. The ringing stopped a few seconds before the villains teleported into the USJ. Tsukachi summed up. From what Midoriya described it as, this aspect of his quirk did not tell him about the villain attack at all. While it is not full clairvoyance, it does seem that Midoriya's quirk has some sort of danger sense built into it, Tsukachi said. Nezu inquired, and what did your quirk say? That Midoriya was telling the truth. Because of his quirk, Detective Tsukachi can determine whether a person's statement is truthful or not, making him a human lie detector. It hasn't been incorrect thus far. Nezu said, well, isn't that an interesting development? The kid has a good heart and a strong heroic spirit. With a quirk as versatile as his, I can place my bet on him being successful. Still, I wonder how his quirks works to include both telekinesis and a danger sense. Nezu and All Might exchanged another glance. Toshinori cautioned Nezu. The response from All Might was, I trust him. Then he faced the investigator. I know about Midoriya's quirk, as well as its origin. But you have to keep it a secret, okay? It's a bit too out there to be public yet. I'm already carrying one monumental secret on my shoulders. Why not add another? Asked Tsukachi. Okay. I hope you're in the mood for something of a strangle-tale. Izuku's days following the USJ attack were unexpectedly calm. Yes, he had to reassure his distraught mother that he was okay despite pushing above his quirk limit. Izuku hoped that Ua wouldn't penalize them for any infirmary water damage. It was refreshing to have the remainder of the week off as well. After everything, it gave Izuku and his classmates a chance to relax. Izuku felt conflicted over the entire experience, thus he needed it. It was far more successful than it might have been for a surprise attack during a field trip. None of the kids were seriously hurt. Eraserhead and 13 were both steadily recovering, and the majority of the villains had been taken prisoner. However, Midoriya's views were less consoling. Shigaraki's pale face and outstretched hand, Kurogiri's flimsy shape, a villain racing at him underwater, the Nomu's lifeless and ferocious expression, and the sound of bone breaking by Izuku's unseen force were all scenes replayed in Izuku's dreams. The artifact that gave Izuku his abilities and alerted him to the villain's presence could be heard throughout. Izuku would pretend to hear the artifact ringing even when he was awake, but it was all a lie. As previously said, Izuku required some time to relax. It was quiet on Izuku's first day back at school. Whatever pressure Ua had, they made sure the media wouldn't harass its kids. The majority of them were seated by the time the start of class was nearly upon them. Since Aizawa was still recuperating, students were speculating about who might teach their homeroom in her place. They were wrong, as evidenced by the customary slam of the door opening. Aizawa could have been the only one to enter. Actually, any number of teachers. Aizawa walked confidently inside and sat down at his desk. The majority of the class gaped in perplexity. Both of Aizawa's arms were in slings, and his face was still covered with visible bandages. Good, you're learning, said Aizawa in a hushed tone. I didn't have to say anything, and you all became quiet. Progress. The students exchanged glances before Yayorozu clumsily held out her hand. Mr. Aizawa, sir, are you sure you should be returning to teaching so soon? Despite Recovery Girl's insistence, I know that I've been in the infirmary too long already. I've been through worse, and this will not stop me from teaching. I don't mean to be impolite, but both of your arms are literally in slings, Kaminari said, raising his hand. Irrelevant. The pupils gazed in silence. Now, just because you won this battle doesn't mean that other challenges won't be coming your way. After all, now is the time to start preparing for the sports festival. When Izuku heard the mention, he snapped. There was a sports festival at almost every hero school. Furthermore, none were as well liked or broadly accepted as UA's. The Olympics have been replaced by the sports festival ever since the first one was staged a long time ago. Every year, Izuku and his mother watched the sports festival, which was their favorite pastime. It was shocking to consider that he was in it at all. Aizawa, sir, is it really a good idea to do the sport festival after an attack from those League of Villains guys? Replied Kaminari. While we have discussed that possibility, the festival is very important to your future careers. It's not just fun and games, it will be your opportunity to get yourself noticed by other pro heroes for future internships. Like any other job, having connections will be a major help towards your hero careers. Aizawa comforted his students as well. We'll have more active on-duty heroes as security than previous years. We'll be taking every precaution to make sure this festival goes smoothly. With it only being 2 weeks away, I'd recommend you all start preparing. Or don't. It's your future. Izuku began to feel drawn in several directions as the day went on. It was difficult for him to focus on his studies because of the events at the USJ, the abrupt realization that the sports festival was approaching sooner than anticipated, and the necessity to better himself in order to perform well in the competitions. He wasn't completely unaware of the changes, though. His classmates, particularly those who were paired up throughout the attack, appeared to be closer. Uraraka, who had a very determined expression on her face, halted Izuku and Iida as they were heading to lunch with the rest of the class. Promise me, we'll do our best at the sports festival, got it? Uraraka replied. Izuku responded, I mean, yeah, I guess, and Iida added, it wouldn't be fair not to. Demanding, got it? Uraraka said. Izuku and Iida responded, a little alarmed, yes, ma'am. Do my best, was the mantra Uraraka repeated to herself as she nodded and left. Well, that was slightly scary, said Izuku. Indeed, said Iida. However, her enthusiasm is not unfounded. The sports festival is more than just friendly competition in games. It's one of the most important steps to establish oneself in the pro hero business. When you put it like that, I get it. I just never realized the sports festival was that important to our futures. An unexpected fourth individual joined the three as they proceeded to their table after getting their food. Sue was the one. She had come to express her gratitude to Izuku for saving her at the USJ. Flustered, Midoriya attempted to rationalize that it was part of their training to become heroes. Saving your peers would be instinctive, of course. Izuku would be without hope on the field, though, if he could hardly respond to one expression of gratitude. Later, Bakugo burst into the table as Uraraka was wrapping up her explanation of why she wanted to become a hero, to become affluent enough to allow her suffering parents to retire in comfort and luxury. Katsuki said, Hey, Deku, in a voice that was surprisingly loud, shut up and follow me. Uraraka spoke up for Izuku, saying, you don't have to talk to him like that. And frankly, most of us find your attitude appalling, Iida continued. If you have something to say to Midoriya, you can say it in front of all of us, Sue said. I don't care about you extras. This is between me and Deku, Bakugo said. Before they could respond, Izuku made the decision to defend himself. Izuku said, guys, look, I'll go. I'll be alright. This isn't how it was back in middle school. Izuku looked into Bakugo's eyes, which were burning with anger and annoyance. Uraraka said, hey, if he pulls something, you'll let us know, right? Izuku smiled shyly. I got it. Bakugo remained silent. With a grumble, he turned to leave, Izuku trailing behind him. The two went by a table that had 2 trays with Kirishima on it. Bakugo's belongings were in close proximity to one of them. The hardener with the red hair appeared to want to follow but chose not to. He simply gave Midoriya the thumbs up with assurance. The blonde bomber faced Izuku as the two made their way to a rather remote area of the cafeteria. Midoriya let out a sigh. What's this about, Kachan? For one, quit using that stupid nickname. Only if you quit calling me Deku. And second, Bakugo went on, is that I don't care how you got your quirk. That doesn't matter to me. What matters is you knowing your place. Away from me in the background. Izuku questioned, is that what all this is, Kachan? More of the same, only with less explosions. Bakugo laughed. I don't know what you've been doing the last couple of days, but I've been reading and our whole class is getting talked about. Especially me, icy hot, and spiky hair for taking on that all-might monster freak. Given his personal encounter with the monster, Izuku surmised that he was talking about Todoroki and Kirishima assisting him in facing the Nomu. And since you're not reading the news like your usual nerd self, You don't know how much people talk about your useless ass. For Izuku, that was a literal slap in the face. Not that he was worthless, but that he was being noticed. People are talking about you getting bitch slapped by that monster and then breaking Handfreak's arm, like you're some actual hero, Bakugo growled. But Izuku was reminded of his unsettling visions. The Nomu ready to attack, the terror in Sue and Mineta, the hatred emanating from Shigaraki as his arm twisted and limps. When Bakugo said, "Look at you. You've been moping all day since we came back," he startled Izuku with a start. All because you broke one villain's arm. God, I'd hate to see how you'd react if you killed someone. Izuku's face was marked with horror as he considered the idea. Kill, stumbled Izuku. I would never, I couldn't. Exactly, said Bakugo. You and the rest of these extras think being a hero is about that rescue bull or whatever. The truth is that a real hero takes the villain head on and stops them from hurting other people. And that means putting villains down like the scum they are. Bakugo poked at the boy's chest and said, and you, Deku, you don't have what it takes. So, I'm going to tell you what I told the rest of the extras. Stay out of my way. There's only room for one number one, and that's going to be me. The blonde then headed back toward the cafeteria. Izuku remained silent while Bakugo's remarks continued to echo in his mind. He shook his head and went back to his table, where his companions were seated, to counter this. Uraraka inquired, Hey, are you okay? Did Bakugo do anything to you? No, he just gave me his thoughts, Izuku said. Honestly, this was probably the calmest conversation I had with him yet. Usually, there are more explosions. Iida offered his opinion. Even so, I find it disappointing that one of our class members can have such horrible attitude, he said. And that guy still thinks he's going to be number one, Sue said. Izuku timidly stated, well, I think he has a chance at it, in defense of his erstwhile comrade. His quirk is really powerful, he's strong, smart, and has the drive to improve himself. He just needs a bit of work. He's also an egotistical jerk who literally calls us extras, and yells, die, at whoever he's attacking. Okay, he needs a lot of work. Look, Deku, you don't have to let Bakugo push you or anyone else around. Uraraka replied. We're all here to be heroes. No one here needs to be treated any less. The words, thanks Uraraka, made Izuku flush. But Bakugo found the subject of his attitude toward the telekinetic to be too awkward, so he changed the subject. So, you have any plans to train for the sports festival? The majority of them gave some variation of training at a peculiar gym. That was not an option for Izuku. The cost of a membership would strain the household's finances even though it wasn't covered by the Midoriya's payroll. Izuku didn't want them to know that it would also reduce his budget for items. Sue asked, so, what's your plan, Midoriya? Oh, I'm thinking about getting one of the UA's teachers to help me with my quirk, replied Izuku. I've got some ideas on what to improve. I just need somebody to help. Oh, who'd you get? Uraraka inquired. Izuku stumbled and said, I mean, I didn't ask them yet, but I do have an idea on who I want. While I'm grateful for you asking me to train one-on-one for the sports festival, I'm still not sure why you asked me specifically. Izuku turned to face the man who was posing the query. Both of them were in one of the many indoor gyms at UA. Since it was after school, a lot of his friends were either heading home, training, or somewhere else. Izuku answered the teacher the youngster requested for assistance, trying not to stutter. Izuku's math instructor is Ectoplasm, the ghostly hero. Well, you see, stumbled Izuku. I figured that, with your clones and all, you understand how to control physical objects with your mind, and also given your whole ghostly image, you would have some insight about flying or just floating, and even then, Ectoplasm gestured to Izuku to stop talking. Okay, slow down a bit, he said. First, that's a good idea of how my quirk works, but that's not the whole story. My clones are semi-autonomous. I give them commands, and they carry it out. They have all the same knowledge I know. If I don't give them any orders, then they're just extra bodies I can use for distraction or confusion. And second, I don't really float or anything like that. It's support gear that I use for my legs. The pro took off his trench coat to show off a mechanical limb. Oh, Izuku wrote, his optimism waning. Well, I'm sorry to have bothered you. I'll just leave. Ectoplasm stopped Izuku as he turned to go. Just because I'm not exactly what you thought I was, doesn't mean I won't help you. Really? Izuku asked, turning around. Wait, don't you have schoolwork to grade or something? Don't worry, I'll have one of my other selves to work on it. Wow, that's really obvious. I should have thought of that beforehand. That made the ghostly hero laugh. So, kid, what can I help you with? Well, sir, I want to improve my flying abilities. Flying? Asked Ectoplasm. Thought your quirk was listed as telekinesis. Well, you're right, said Izuku. It's just that I can also make myself fly with my quirk. Izuku was aware that he needed to be more mobile for the celebration. The third event was always a tournament-style competition, even though the most of the events vary from year to year. Izuku was aware of the benefit of flying even in that situation. Additionally, Izuku needed to get down to AT if the other two sports required a lot of motion. Ectoplasm pondered, that sounds promising, have you put that idea into action? Well, twice, actually, said Izuku. The first, I didn't have anything to stop myself from, floating away. And the second was during the quirk apprehension test Mr. Aizawa gave us. I barely made it to the other side of the long jump pit. Trying to fly for the first time without a ceiling. Yeah, not the best plan, but at least you survived. Now, do you remember what you were feeling at the time? When I was flying, right? Ectoplasm went on, more or less lift off. Flying quirks are more often than not, and in your case especially, mental rather than physical in nature. Sure, most of them have wings or other means of propulsion, but they all come from within the mind. Remember what you were feeling when you flew and try it again. Izuku exhaled deeply and focused. He recalled his first flight attempt on the beach. He recalled how he was able to float since his quirk enveloped him. He recalled how exciting it was to truly soar and defy gravity. He felt that old feeling again. He knew he was floating without even opening his eyes. His climb was now halted by that well-known issue. As Ectoplasm advised, remember, you are the one in control, not your quirk. Izuku began to take notice. He focused on stopping his rise, and it came to pass. Izuku was hovering in midair for a few feet now, gazing down at his teacher. Izuku exclaimed, I think I got it, Mr. Ectoplasm. According to the pro, not bad, kid, now try and move around. Izuku gave a nod. He had previously done this. He pushed forward as a result, slowly. Ectoplasm yelled from below, remember, you control the speed, Midoriya. Izuku heeded the counsel. He began to tug harder at himself. Izuku forced his grip on himself to pivot and go in the opposite way as he began to approach the wall. He was beginning to make progress now. Before stopping close to Ectoplasm, he was able to finish a full lap around the gym. Ectoplasm added, not bad for a third-time flyer. So, you still want to this one-on-one training? Yes. Yes sir, I would, Izuku replied as he sat down. Good, because there's going to be more on the schedule than just flying. For starters, working on your telekinetic blasts. The instructor clarified. How do you know about that? Word of mouth from the other teachers, mostly. Even if Eraserhead doesn't tell us anything outright, we still get bits and pieces. You and I know you're good with throwing objects with your quirk. I also know that you have the ability to unleash those telekinetic blasts, but you lack the control to do it willingly. Ectoplasm said Izuku, this won't be easy, you know that? Izuku said, I know, but if that's what it takes to succeed, I'll do it. The spectral hero grinned. Nice attitude. Let's see if it holds up at the end. Somewhere, a seemingly harmless tavern was just existing, fitting in with the street's other structures. It was almost silent inside. The bartender wiping glasses and a man scratching the long table were the only sounds. A modest headquarters for the League of Villains. Shigaraki used his left hand to irritate the table by clawing at it. Garaki, his master's top physician, had put a cast and sling on his right arm. Anyone in the room could sense the young man's rage and loathing, even if they didn't know who he was. Kurogiri took a break from his usual cleaning. The warp quirk user declared, he's here. A little television turns on in a top corner. Only the text, audio only, appears. No video is displayed. The voice said, Tamura, with a wheeze that sounded like it was mechanical. How are you healing? The doctor said the arm should be healed in a month or two, Shigaraki replied. Master, I don't know why you can't just use a healing quirk on me. Consider it a reminder of what happened and what to avoid next time. Shigaraki runs his fingers over his cast while gritting his teeth. He can't take care of the itching on his neck because of the pain in the sling whenever he wants to move the arm. The speaker continued, Tamura, recount of what transpired at the USJ. Kurogiri interrupted, Sir, I have already sent a report of the events. The voice said, I know. I want him to tell me everything himself. Shigaraki let out a sigh. It started out good enough. Me, Kurogiri, the Nomu, and a bunch of villains trapped Eraserhead, 13, and those brats in the USJ. All Might wasn't there like planned, so I decided to let those weaklings have fun. I sicked a bunch of them on Eraserhead, but he wiped the floor with them with ease. The voice said, "It's a shame. The quality of villains are no longer what they used to be anymore." Then I sent the Nomu after Eraserhead. That hero scum could barely move after the beatdown it gave him. When I ordered the Nomu to kill Eraserhead, he stopped it. Waiting for Tamura to finish his summary, the speaker remained quiet. It was some stupid brat. Green puffy hair and freckles. Somehow stopped the Nomu with his mind or something. Part of his quirk, said Shigaraki. I made the Nomu sent that brat away, easy peasy. Then I decided to dust one of the other brats. You know, get some credibility. When I went to kill some frog-faced girl. Angrily, Shigaraki gripped the air close to the sling. He did this to me. The speaker pondered, that child must be something, to hurt poor Tamura after the modifications we did to him. I swear, if I find that brat again, I'll make it as long and painful as I can, before I. The voice said, enough, Tamura, and the villain was silenced. I understand your want for revenge, but do not let it cloud your reasoning. Too many villains burn themselves at both ends for something as petty as revenge. Shigaraki became enraged at it, but he recalled that his master was correct in this regard. I understand, my master. Continue. Then, he showed up. All Might. Then the Nomu and All Might fought, and it was grand. It was matching him blow for blow and could heal from any damage. Shigaraki smashed his hand on the table and exclaimed, and then it lost. I don't get it, it was supposed to kill All Might. Why didn't it? Why? Unfortunately, some heroes can be stubborn like that. All Might especially, the voice replied. Do not let this one failure hang over you. Learn from it, improve upon it, and when the next opportunity comes, seize victory in your grasp. Then, you will be one step closer to becoming my successor. The concept made Shigaraki's face light up. Still, thought his lord. I have not heard of someone with a telekinetic quirk that powerful. Kurogiri, is there any information on the boy? Yes, my master. The media has identified the boy as Izuku Midoriya. The voice kept the two on edge with its tone. Kurogiri inquired, is the name familiar to you, sir? Izuku Midoriya is a nobody. Someone barely a pawn in the grand scheme of things. Yet, it seems recent events have earned him some form of investigation. I'll have him looked into. The voice sensed that the topic of conversation needed to change. Despite the loss of our Nomu, Dr. Garaki has already confirmed the near completion of several more. They will accompany you on your next attack. Master, UA will be having their sports festival soon. Let me lead an attack on it. That will crush the heroes' spirits, said Shigaraki. You will do no such thing, but master. Shigaraki held his tongue in response to the threat, asking, do I need to repeat myself? The voice began to list. There are several reasons to why we will not launch an attack so soon, it said. For one, attacking a place filled to the brim with heroes will surely end with you captured or dead. Second, you, young Tamura, need rest. No use going in if you are not at your best. Third, a group of 2 people is not what I would call a league, now is it? Find and recruit more villains, the voice said. Kurogiri added, I have heard rumors of a hero killer going from city to city to their list of possible recruits. I will leave that up to you. Kurogiri gave the television a nod. And finally, the sports festival will lure the heroes into a false sense of security. We have already attacked them on their grounds. They will be cautious. But, in wallowing of their own self-importance and grandeur, they will grow complacent. They believe that they still control the peace of this country. And, when they least expect it, that is when we will attack. The public's trust in their heroes will break, bit by bit, until they welcome our new order with open arms. Shigaraki began to chuckle at the thought of people who are so devoted to their heroes voluntarily discarding their defenders when they recognize that the heroes are unable to keep them safe. Anyone could see that the voice grinned happily at his own schemes even if there was no image. Soon, the world shall bow once again, in awe and terror, at the name of All for One.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.